Ready? All right, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us on our October 1st, 2025 regular council meeting. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge that the land on which we're gathered on today is the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land, and I'd like to recognize that yesterday was we had the Spirit Walk here in the Comox Valley with well over 1,000 people, probably close to 1,500 people, all dressed in orange. It was a very meaningful day. So with that, I'm going to move it on to a statement for the gallery. We normally don't have this many people at our meetings for some reason. I think they're very exciting. I come every time, but just want to thank you all for attending. This is a public council meeting, and it's important that this be a safe and comfortable environment for everyone to be able to hear and see the proceedings. We ask all of those here in person to mute your phones. And if you think it's muted, just check it right now while I do the rest of this. Also, be respectful of meeting speakers and do not interrupt the proceedings with applause, comments, or groans. It will be difficult for some, I know. If you feel the need to make noises, we'll just ask that you go out into the hallway. And if you try to make noises in here, I will stop and ask you to go out into the hallway. So with that, we ask that anybody who has a sign that they'd like to have, that you keep that at the back of the room where it won't block anybody's view. Other than that, the meeting is streamed live on YouTube, and you can view the agenda on Courtenay.ca, and we'll have paper copies of the agenda as well. And you'll be able to watch this after tonight's meeting as well. And with that, I'll move on to our introduction of late items. I don't believe we have any. And we'll move into our regular council minutes from September 17th. Excellent. Are there any errors or omissions? Hearing none, we'll accept those unanimously for the council, and we'll bring up our delegation. Jordan, if you'd like to approach the podium, and I might even be able to turn on your microphone. Thank you. And you're on.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah, it sounds fantastic. Okay. And you've got 10 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'm grateful to be here to chat about the land variance permit and proposed 5G TELUS tower at 1000 Percy Avenue. My name is Jordan Layton. I'm a Courtenay-based healthcare professional. I'm also a member of VISTA, Vancouver Island Safe Technology Alliance. In 2019, not advancing. It's the right button.
You may have to
we're having some problems here with the
tech. Click on the screen. Now try it again.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Second slide, please. Might need a few more seconds after that one.
Reset it. Is that okay?
Okay. There we go. My name is Jordan Layton. I'm a Courtenay-based healthcare professional. I'm also a member of VISTA, Vancouver Island Safe Technology Alliance. In 2019, while living near a cell tower, I experienced a case of EMF, or microwave syndrome, insomnia, brain fog, and feeling like I wanted to crawl out of my skin. Additionally, this talk is based on the work of Dr. Magda Habas, a professor emeritus and scientist out of Trent University, and Hilary Jones, who is also a VISTA member. The EMF sickness I experienced took me on a multi-year journey away from cities where my healing began. In 2022, I made it to Courtenay, and one reason I purchased a house here was a low number of cell towers, and something I'm sure we all can agree on, this is a wonderful place to call home. And now a story about a small USA town and a 5G tower. In 2020, Verizon erected a 5G tower in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. Levels of radio frequency radiation were well below Federal Communication Commission guidelines. People living near the tower became ill, and doctors after the antennas were activated, doctors diagnosed them with microwave sickness, and some had to leave their homes for relief. Citizens complained to the Pittsfield Board of Health, but after 18 months when nothing had been done, they took legal action against Verizon in Pittsfield. Eventually, the Board of Health agreed that there were some serious health issues, and they issued Verizon with a cease and desist order. Verizon retaliated and sued the Pittsfield Board of Health. This situation is still unresolved as of 2025, and I will revisit it near the end of this talk. Electromagnetic radiation is a form of air pollution. Insurance companies in Canada classify radio frequencies as a pollutant and have exclusion policies against damages. Electromagnetic radiation is generated by wireless technology and electronic devices. Another story, this time, and a more specific example of microwave syndrome related to EMF sensitivity in one couple's experience. In 2023, this case report was published for an apartment in Sweden. 3G and 4G antennas were replaced by 5G antennas. Exposure in the bedroom with 3G and 4G antennas was 9,000 microwatts per meter squared. Once the 5G antennas were activated, the levels increased exponentially. Experiencing EMF sickness, the family moved to an office space with lower levels, and they eventually purchased a countryside house with low levels of radiation. The reading taken in March 2022 peaked the meter in the red circle at 2.5 million microwatts per meter squared. Health Canada's guideline, a document titled Safety Code 6, allows for a total of almost 4.4 million microwatts per meter squared, averaged over 6 minutes. This is thousands of times beyond anything healthy. Scratching your head? Me too. This is an image of their symptoms. Symptoms are in blue, with pale blue showing the number of symptoms and dark blue indicating the severity of symptoms. These are the symptoms experienced by the husband and the wife, with severity color-coded as shown here. This couple experienced a lot of symptoms when exposed to 5G radiation, with the wife having a much greater reaction than the husband. Remember, according to Health Canada, these exposures are safe. Again, I'm scratching my head. Safety Code 6 is Health Canada's guideline to EMF exposure and reported safety guidelines. Keywords: reported and guideline. It tests exposure for 6 minutes and does not account for non-thermal effects. Non-thermal effects include DNA damage, neurological, and biological impacts. Written in 1979, it is a relic from the past and was last updated in 2015. I'm sure we all know technology has definitely changed since then. The above information is directly from Safety Code 6. The most interesting line to me is this: Health Canada scientists continually monitor and analyze all domestic and international scientific literature related to the health effects of radiofrequency EMF exposure. In regards to this statement, a Vista member contacted Health Canada asking for a comprehensive list of literature they're referring to. The response she received is below. Particular wording to note is this: no such list exists. You have a paper copy of that email sitting in front of you. This table represents RF limits set by various world governments. Canada is up near the top. By comparison, the European Parliament down below at 106. As you know, the building on the left is the junction, 988 8th Street in Courtenay, roughly 70 meters away from the tower, a vulnerable population. At Kiwanis Village, 150 meters away, a low-income seniors complex. Of course, seniors often in hearing aids and pacemakers. More to come on that. Children are particularly vulnerable to EMF exposure. With thinner skulls and less brain tissue compared to adults, more of their brain is absorbing the same amount of EMF. This study talks about that. And here in the study summary conclusion, it mentions how their behavior gets altered. Poor outcomes for problem solving, personal social issues, and being close to cell phone towers is linked to these changes. Related, most of you will recognize this daycare on McPhee Avenue, Little Sparks. It is roughly 300 meters away from the tower. 3 questions. 1, does TELUS and possibly the city have insurance if children of Little Sparks become sick and parents pursue litigation? 2, would you like your children to attend Little Sparks? 3, did the parents of the children of Little Sparks get notified? I've been told the answer is no. Insurance is an interesting topic. Let's look at TELUS's annual report to its shareholders in 2024. This is from page 95. Potential impacts associated with low levels of non-ionizing radio frequency emissions from mobile phones and cell towers have been a matter of public concern, and we anticipate they'll continue to be a public concern as we deploy 5G network technology, with the number of small cells in our infrastructure expected to increase. Then further along on the same page, we have commercial liability insurance. Our insurance coverage may be insufficient or may not provide coverage at all for certain events. So let that one sink in a little bit. Certain events. This is Rogers shareholders report in 2024. It talks about radio frequency and 5G being linked to problems with cancer, problems with hearing aids and pacemakers. Does that sound familiar? I find it interesting that TELUS and Rogers mention this, as they are not medical professionals. So if TELUS coverage is insufficient or non-existent and health problems emerge, is the risk of potential litigation going to be assumed by mayor and council? Have we spoken to our legal team about this matter? On a different note, at the federal level, I was shocked to learn that ISED, Innovation, Science and Economic Development, is actually empowering to local councils. These questions were asked by the office of former MP Majid Johari of ISED in early 2025. You have a paper copy of those questions in front of you. Does ISED issue a formal authorization letter, a license, or any kind of permit to a proponent to build a cell tower? If so, what point does this occur? The short answer is no. The longer answer is that proponents are required to consult the local community and respond to all reasonable and relevant concerns. Excuse me. It allows land use authorities to make informed decisions confirming their concurrence. If council has relevant concerns relating to the full completion of the protocol process, whether relating to land use and or thoroughness of the public consultation, does City Council have the option to submit a letter of non-concurrence? Short answer is yes. LUAs can reject a tower proposal by submitting a letter of non-concurrence to the proponent. So the point that I'm trying to make regarding ISED is that you actually have a choice and ISED will support you. Remember, Safety Code 6 is a guideline, not a requirement. There are many towers, Dove Creek, Cowichan Valley, Nanaimo, Gabriel Island, that have been voted down for some of the reasons. Public opposition, unsightly, unsuitable location, and health concerns are up on that slide. So what if 5G comes to Courtenay, as was discussed at the June 11th council meeting, and people become ill? At minimum, this is likely to increase pressure on healthcare services, impact work, affect the environment. Question, is there a clause in your TELUS contract to remove the antenna if people become ill? I highly recommend this clause. Second question, if people become ill, they may take legal action against TELUS. Another question, does TELUS have insurance to cover damages? As you now know, insurance companies in Canada do not offer coverage for RF pollution. If TELUS does not have insurance, do you? If you want insurance to cover RF poisoning, you may need to purchase additional pollution liability insurance. So questions, where will people go? Who paid for litigation? Taxpayers? On a positive note, could this be an opportunity for TELUS with its $938 million profit in 2024 to create a wireless technology that's safe? Imagine the publicity. So the next steps, do not grant TELUS a letter of DVP concurrence until you understand what you're dealing with. Contact Marg at Canadians for Safe Technologies. She's a former research biologist with the federal government. She's a wealth of knowledge on this subject. Let the public know you are aware of RF exposure and litigation potential. 911 calls can be made from any phone, regardless of whether or not it is a SIM card. Wi-Fi also supports 911 calls and encourage fiber optic connections. This is a no-brainer. So I believe new technologies should embrace the physician's motto. Firstly, do no harm. Secondly, similar to physicians and King Charles, I know that councillors take oaths of office when being sworn in. These oaths are directly from Courtenay's website. The lines I'd like to highlight are, I'll faithfully perform the duties of my office for the betterment of my community, and my contact in public affairs will be of the highest integrity. So I'm grateful that you made these oaths, and as a taxpaying member of your constituency, I bind you to them, so help me God. To end, a quote from the Lorax, Dr. Seuss book, and one I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Everyone here wearing a badge is tower opposed. This tower will bring harm to those nearby it. You have an opportunity to stick to your oaths and not let that harm come to pass. You have numerous studies in front of you demonstrating 5G dangers. Ditto for your email. You can protect the people and the nature in your community. If you protect the most vulnerable, you protect everyone. Thank you.
That was right under the wire, so appreciate it. Sorry, we can't be clapping. Yeah, you can wave your jazz hands. That I think is acceptable. Thanks so much, and I just want to take a moment just to thank the folks that have met with myself, and I believe quite a few of the councillors over the past few months. I really appreciate the time and energy that it's taken to first of all reach out to us and take time out of your days to meet with us. So I do appreciate that, and I'll look to my council in case there's any questions from our delegation today. And I don't see any questions at this point. So Jordan, thank you very much for your presentation. All right, and moving along, we're going to go into development services, and we have a request for statement of concurrence and development variance permit application to number 2503 for 1000 Piercy Avenue, and I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Garbett.
Thank you, through Mayor and Council. We have a staff report starting on page 119 of the agenda, and we have a new staff person that Nancy Goddard, our manager of long range planning, is going to introduce. So through Nancy, you're going to get to meet our
Yeah,
new,
thank you.
planning staff.
Yeah, through the mayor to council and everybody here. I just wanted, yes, indeed, to introduce our new planner, Andrew Stewart Jones, just sitting down at the end here, planner two in development planning. He's been with us only 2 short months and already is in front of council. It's quite exciting. Has quite a bit of experience, has been working most recently up in the north of the regional district of Kitimat-Stakeen and moved down here for the job and completed his planning education at the local island, Vancouver Island University program. So just wanted to give a little context to a new member here.
Thanks very much, Nancy. Over to you.
Great. So through the mayor, before I go into the report, I do want to mention that we have 2 representatives for TELUS Communications here. So Brian Gregg and Doug Anastos, they are attending in person and they will be available to answer questions regarding the application.
Thank you.
So the application before you is to construct a 44-meter tall monopole antenna system with a 2-meter lightning rod for a total height of 46 meters. This also includes an equipment building on the subject property, which is the city's public works yard located at 1000 Piercy Avenue. The tower and equipment building would be located within an estimated 15 by 15 meter fence compound located on the northeast corner of the subject property. The tower would be accessed off of 8th Street through a narrow strip of city land located immediately adjacent to the rail corridor. This would help mitigate any conflict between the proposal and the public works yard use. Property information and proposed construction layout and road access off of 8th Street are shown in figures 1 and 2 of the report. The property is also zoned industrial 2, which allows for the proposed use. So in terms of background, on June 11th, 2025, staff introduced the proposed project and requested approval from council to do the 2 following items. The first was to direct staff to proceed with processing a development variance permit application for the proposed tower. And the second was to direct staff to negotiate a license of occupation between the City of Courtenay and TELUS Communications, Inc. This report is to address the first requested approval from that meeting, which is for a development variance permit application, as well as a statement of concurrence for the proposed tower. So to provide a bit of context, wireless service demand has grown significantly, requiring new infrastructure to fill service gaps. The proposed tower is expected to fill existing service gaps in West Courtenay. The proposed variances to accommodate the proposed tower are for a height variance of from 1.2 times to 3.1 times the maximum permitted height in that zone. There's also a setback variance from 9 meters for the rear yard to 7.61 meters for the rear yard. The proposed height and siting of the antenna system structure has been established by an engineering professional and is determined to be the minimum height required to deliver reliable connectivity to the surrounding area. From a land use perspective, the height and siting of the structure and related compound have been cited to minimize impact to surrounding properties, and the development variance permit application is supportable by staff. So staff would like to highlight that under the Radio Communications Act, the Federal Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, ISED, has sole jurisdiction over interprovincial and international communication facilities. ISED requires all proponents to consult with the local land use authorities and public, notwithstanding that ISED has exclusive jurisdiction in the licensing of telecommunication sites. Local governments can communicate and provide guidance to the proponent on the particular sensitivities, planning priorities, and characteristics of an area, and they can establish siting guidelines. Earlier this year, the city adopted an antenna systems application and process policy in order to provide clarity on the processing of such applications, including public engagement. The proposal meets the city's policy in this regard, as well as applicable location and design guidelines. So in terms of public engagement, this project had 2 components. The first component was public engagement initiated by the applicant, and the second was public engagement initiated by the city. So the public engagement initiated by the applicant followed requirements administered by the Federal Minister of Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada under the Radio Communications Act, as well as the requirements of the City of Courtenay's antenna system application process policy. So the requirements include a 90-day public consultation period, which included a 140-meter mail-out area to neighboring properties. It included hosting a public open house, as well as gathering any comments regarding the application. The applicant has provided a summary of engagement in attachment number 3 of this report, where they received 82 written comments, of which 67% indicate support, 31% indicate concerns or opposition, and 3% were neutral. Public engagement initiated by the city was for the development variance permit associated with this application. This included notification to owners and occupants within a 30-meter radius on September 15th, 2025. The city has received 6 comments, all of which were against the proposal. So there's currently a license of occupation as well that has been drafted. And the Director of Finance might be able to speak to some of those pieces if council had questions. So should council approve the development variance permit, a letter of concurrence citing reasons of support contained within option 1 of the resolutions will be provided to the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada. So with that, I conclude my remarks and entertain any questions that council may have.
All right, thanks very much. Appreciate your first report to council. And with that, are there any questions from any of the councillors? Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. So the ISED stipulates what we can and cannot be considering when making this decision, and there are a number of factors listed, including proposed impacts on property values and health concerns, and those are specifically set out as not being applicable to the decision that we're making. It was noted that there were, I think, 25 comments that were against the proposal, and it was stated that there were 19 of which were deemed to be inapplicable, which by math means that there were 6 which were applicable. And I'm just wondering if you could just run through what those 6 applicable comments on the siting of the tower were and what staff's assessment of them were, please.
You can hear me? Yeah. Through the mayor. So this question was posed to the applicant. So the applicant responded that the commenters who stated opposition but listed some relevant types of concerns largely focused on the 3 following subjects. So the first one was a perception that there might be an alternative superior tower siting option available that TELUS ought to explore. The second was a view that the design could be improved in some manner and that a tower of this scale would pose a visual impact to adjacent uses. And the third is a perception that there may be environmental impacts of some kind that TELUS should address. So these concerns, these concerns were potentially valid considering ISED protocols. However, the applicant addressed each of these concerns. For instance, most of those who suggested that TELUS explore an alternative tower siting option were not able to identify a viable alternative location for a tower within the service area, and rather some indicated that TELUS used areas several kilometers away, for example, north of Puntledge Park, which is outside of TELUS's search area. Regarding design, some of the commenters indicated that the tower would be a visual blight and too visible from adjacent residences. In response, the applicant explained the property. The property is industrial zoned, and that they have proposed a relatively slim monopole design, which is the most slender type available. They noted that the tower is set back as far as possible away from adjacent residences beside the rail tracks and primarily industrial uses to the east of the rail tracks. It was also noted that the tower height has been minimized to the extent feasible while enabling reliable connectivity. With regards to perceived environmental impacts, the applicant noted that although TELUS will comply with all regulatory requirements, this type of proposal is generally exempt from the need for an environmental assessment under the Impact Assessment Act as per feedback from the Impact Assessment Agency. Yeah, and the applicant could also respond to if they had anything to add.
Oh, thanks for that. Does the applicant have anything to add to the comments? Seeing, oh.
Hear us?
Just turning your microphone on now.
Okay, sorry. My name's Brian Gregg. I'm a land use consultant representing TELUS.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Doug Anastos, and I work for TELUS, and actually I also live in the community.
Yeah, so very briefly on my end, I think Planner Andrew did an excellent job of summarizing the proposal, as well as addressing or summarizing how we addressed each of the concerns that arose. The main thing that I think to me that stood out that I'd like to point out is that this proposal is a result of long-standing requests in the community for better service. There is indeed a pretty severe coverage gap. Essentially, if you were to go look at the service area, we did provide some coverage maps, but it's from Puntledge Park down to the south where we have a new site at Moray Avenue. So it's the areas in between Puntledge Park and Moray Avenue and some of the residential areas on either side of Willamar Avenue that this will resolve the coverage gaps for. And indeed, there are some pretty challenging coverage issues there. Just today, driving around, we noticed that in some areas we couldn't check our emails, couldn't make a phone call in certain areas, for instance. So it is a real concern. The other thing that I think has already been addressed very well, but it really stood out to me as the person managing the consultation process for the proponent, is that the vast majority of the concerns truly were effectively a desire to question the validity of Health Canada's Safety Code 6. And I think that was reflected in the delegation's presentation again here today. But from where we're coming from, Safety Code 6 is the only safety code that we are bound to adhere to as a wireless service provider in Canada. So TELUS attests that it will comply with this safety code. It's a requirement. And ISED has actually specifically stated, as Andrew noted, that debating the validity of Safety Code 6 is outside this, or supposed to be outside the scope of this process. So while we did respond to everyone in earnest and make a note of all the comments, we didn't exclude anyone's input. I think it is noteworthy, just to reiterate Andrew's comments, that is supposed to be outside the scope of this decision-making process per ISED protocols.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, just a few other quick notes just on the bigger picture, I guess, in the Valley, because I think anybody that lives in the Valley can attest to the fact that there is unreliable service throughout many areas. So I just wanted to note that TELUS is taking a comprehensive perspective on this issue, and we're actually, this year, we've proceeded with construction of 4 cell sites across the Valley. So this would be number 5. I would say this is probably the most important, just in terms of the pain points in the community. I mean, I know, I spent a lot of time in West Courtenay, and there's, cell service is very unreliable. But I just wanted to note that just to sort of demonstrate that that TELUS understands the need for service, and we're taking a comprehensive perspective on fixing this issue. So,
all right, Councillor Cole Hamilton, did that answer your question? Okay. And one of the things that you brought up, since you brought up the safety code, so if the safety code changes in the future, like they talked about the updates, and it sounds like it's maybe due for an update at this point as well. My assumption, and just want to confirm, that TELUS would have to then adhere to whatever changes that happen within that safety code.
Correct, Your Worship. Yes. So, and it is updated on a fairly, I guess you could say, regular basis, or at least it's reviewed continuously. What I would note is that you're right, correct. There's no grandfathering allowed. So everything has to be compliant at all times. The past doesn't matter, you know, so installations would have to be changed to be compliant if that was the case. The thing that I do always note though is that, you know, the safety code 6 applies to everything, all installations. And when we're talking about a tower, it really doesn't apply in a meaningful sense, you know, because the levels are so far below anyway that it's never anywhere close to exceeding safety code 6 maximum. So, you know, for instance, we have the same equipment on rooftops, and we do have to have some signage if you access the rooftop, if you're getting close to the equipment, but certainly not for towers.
Okay, appreciate that. Councillor Frisch?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the presentation from staff. I guess I have a question for you guys, the proponent, if that's possible. And you kind of already talked about your view on sort of the people that are concerned about the tower, but maybe I could just ask you to go into it a bit deeper. I wonder if other communities are having similar pushback towards the installation of 5G network towers and other infrastructure.
Yeah, through your worship. We do experience concerns around health and safety, you know, with tower proposals. What I would note, I'd note a few things. You know, on Vancouver Island, historically, there has been a lot of concerns, and we can find, you know, in some cases, certainly in the Comox Valley, we hear from the same people over and over again. So there is that dynamic as well. But this has changed a lot in recent years. I mean, what I've seen, and I've worked at TELUS for quite a while, is that communities are understanding the need for reliable connectivity. So while we still hear these concerns, on the other side of the story, which we don't, you know, people don't come out when they're supportive, quite frankly, but we hear a lot of support from communities and really a demand, you know, expectation for reliable cell service. That is certainly the case in Courtenay. I can say just on a personal level, I talk to people all the time. As soon as anybody, you know, finds out what I do for a living, I hear about the need for this. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sides.
Yeah, and I think if I got the numbers correctly, the percentage of letters of support was somewhere around 67% versus 31% against. So that was another sort of data point as well that I think was brought up today in regards to your question. I don't see any further questions, so I'll entertain a motion. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments by any members of council? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. All right, and from there, we'll go to the temporary use permit application for number 2501 at 941 Cumberland Road. And maybe what we'll do is for those that don't want to stay for the rest of the council meeting, this would probably be a good time to exit. And there'll be lots of potential to speak outside once you're outside the gallery. All right, so we're going to move on to the temporary use permit 2501 for 971 Cumberland Road, and I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Garbutt.
Yeah, thank you through the mayor to council. Council's familiar, starting on page 234 of the agenda, the application in front of us from Lookout Society for a temporary use permit. Ms. Goddard is going to introduce the report, and also our planner, Jacob Kramer, is here to be part of that presentation. Online, we have a representative of Lookout Society, and then Lee Fox, I believe, is here for questions as well, if council has any. Ms. Goddard?
That's right. Thank you through the mayor to council. Really, I'm just providing an introduction again. So Jacob Kramer, our policy planner too, he'll be presenting the land use component of the report. And then Susie Saunders, Director of Recreation and Cultural Services, will be presenting the topics around operations. And so that's it from me.
Yeah, so through the mayor, good evening, mayor and council. I'm here tonight introducing temporary use permit application number 2501 for 971 Cumberland Road. I want to mention that this report and its accompanying motions were a joint effort between Development Services Department and the Recreation, Culture, and Community Services Department. So I'm going to speak to the land use application and its process and the first recommended motion before I hand it over to Director Saunders to go into more depth around the operation and agreements for the site should council approve the TUP. I also want to acknowledge that Lookout Housing and Health Society, the applicant is in the audience. I think maybe physically here, definitely online. So they will also be here to answer questions as well. And so for your consideration is temporary use permit application number 2501. This application requests that shelter be allowed as a permitted use at 971 Cumberland Road. This application was made by Lookout Housing and Health Society with authorization from the city, who is the owner of the lands, at the direction of council at the July 31st council meeting. The subject property is designated as part of the McPhee Neighborhood Center and is currently zoned Industrial 2, which does not permit shelter as a use. The site was purchased by the city in late 2024 with the intent that it will be used for city operations in the future. However, it is currently unoccupied. Last year, through an emergency decision of council, the site operated as an extreme weather response shelter from February 6th to April 14th, open only at night and between the hours of 8:30 p.m. and 7 a.m. and when certain weather thresholds were triggered. This year, funding has been earmarked by BC Housing to Lookout Society for operation of a temporary winter shelter should the required land use approvals, in this case the TUP, be secured. This would represent a different shelter model with different operating parameters that offer a higher level of service to shelter guests than what occurred last year. More details on this are found in the staff report and will be presented on by Director Saunders shortly. Currently, the site meets building and fire code requirements for a 20-person occupancy limit. This is most likely represented by 18 shelter guests and 2 staff. To support this application, 2 public consultation processes were undertaken. The first was a community information meeting in accordance with Development Procedures Bylaw number 3106. And the second was the statutory public notice as required by and in accordance with the Local Government Act and the Community Charter. For the community information meeting, a public information and feedback session was held on September 9th from 4:30 to 6:30 at the Florence Filberg Center. To publicize this, notification was sent via mail at the end of August to 1,046 residents and owners within the area defined on the map in Figure 4 of the staff report. The notice also included complimentary materials, and an online feedback form was posted on the city website starting at that same time. Approximately 55 people attended the information session on September 9th, with 15 comments received in person that night and approximately an additional 17 comments that came in online over the remainder of that period. A separate meeting was held on September 8th, where approximately 12 businesses were invited via email and direct phone calls. Those businesses that operate in close proximity to 971 Cumberland Road, 2 businesses attended that meeting. And lastly, a physical sign was posted on site to alert people of the application. Following that, the statutory public notice period commenced on September 12th, with 173 notices being mailed to owners and occupants within a 100-meter radius of the subject property. Notice was also posted on the city's website and in 2 consecutive editions of the record. Through this process, an additional 10 comments have been received and also relayed to council. While the report summarizes some of the key considerations for those who oppose and those who support the TUP, all the written comments for both public consultation processes were provided to you directly. On the whole, there was more opposition to approval of the TUP than there was support. Several comments also spoke more around the operating conditions of the site should the TUP be approved. The recommended motion from staff to council is that council approve the temporary use permit application. The comments received from the public are valid and express real concern. At the same time, the pre-identified need for additional inside shelter space during the winter months is also valid, and a decision to not allow shelter at this location would have significant impacts to those relying on these services. At the last point in time count in 2023, there were 272 individuals homeless in the Comox Valley, with over 90 people unsheltered, meaning they were living outside or had no consistent indoor place to be. Over the 2.5-month period last year, when the extreme weather response shelter operated, the site provided 668 stays, which amounts to 668 unique cases where someone did not have to sleep outside in direct danger from the elements, exposure which can have grave health and sometimes even fatal consequences. It also reflects 668 instances where an individual experiencing homelessness did not have to find shelter elsewhere in the community, such as in a park or in a building alcove. Community concerns that were heard following last year's shelter identified the negative consequences of the unpredictable and inconsistent nature of the extreme weather response shelter and the subsequent negative impacts on the surrounding neighborhood when individuals arrived to the location only to find it unavailable and thus to have to find shelter elsewhere in the nearby vicinity. In light of the significant health and safety risks posed to those living unsheltered, the number of individuals homeless in our community, and the benefits of providing a place for individuals to be inside, as well as the fact that homelessness has consistently been identified as the #1 issue for Courtenay's residents, as understood via the residents' satisfaction survey. Again, staff recommend that the temporary use permit application be approved. I'm now going to pass it over to Director Saunders, who will speak more about the operations and potential agreements.
Thank you. Through the Mayor to Council, just to follow up on some further detail on the recommendations regarding the operations. Should Council approve the temporary use permit, the staff report outlines actions and conditions for Council to consider in entering into an agreement with the shelter service provider identified as Lookout Housing and Health Society. The proposed conditions were developed to assist in responding to and mitigating community concerns that were raised through engagement, as well as from the learning and recommendations coming out of last year's EWR program and draft findings from the winter shelter strategy, which is currently in development. So staff are recommending that if Council approves the temporary use permit, that they direct staff to enter into the necessary agreements for use of the building and delivery of shelter service with the following conditions that are outlined in the report. Currently, or the recommendation is that the hours of operation be limited to 16 hours per day. This is as a result of the current constraints of the facility. Should the facility be improved, the facility could accommodate a 24-hour operation if Council directed so. The hours listed are approximately 6 p.m. to 10 a.m., but I'd note that those hours could change through negotiations with BC Housing and Lookout to identify operating hours that also work from a staff logistics perspective. It's important to note that if the shelter is closing during the day, that shelter guests will be required to leave the facility between those hours and find alternative locations for service and shelter. Shelter capacity is currently limited to 20, with room for 18 shelter guests and 2 staff at any one time. The recommendation is that it includes daily perimeter cleanups, community engagement, and integration. As discussed in the staff report, community integration and engagement is critical for mitigating and reducing community concerns. It's recommended that the operator establish a community outreach position to assist in responding to community concerns and building relationships in the neighborhood, as well as supporting and participating in the implementation of a community integration table. Staff are seeking direction from Council to pursue funding sources for the costs associated with operating the shelter that are not covered by BC Housing, including lease costs, community outreach and engagement, and building improvements. Until such time as funding can be secured, staff are recommending that Council authorize $90,480 in order to initiate work related to community outreach and engagement and to cover the foregone lease revenue. Before we conclude, I'd like to note that a significant amount of the comments received articulated concerns with the current state of homelessness, mental health, and harmful substance use in our community and its visibility, with a concern that the addition of a shelter will increase such activity in the neighborhood. Staff would note that by providing a shelter that operates consistently throughout the season, there will be approximately 18 less individuals living outside in Courtenay. Through the conditions outlined in the report, in addition to the partnership with a skilled operator such as Lookout, it's expected that the provision of an indoor space for sheltering and connections to support and resources will be of benefit to not only those using the shelter, but the broader community as well. And staff are available for questions, and Lookout staff are present if there's questions for the operator.
All right, thanks very much for that. And are there any questions of Council? Councilor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks. The question I had was about the term, and I understand that it's quite necessary to have a shelter. I understand all the reasons for that, and how it could be in fact a benefit to a lot of the problems we see with people being unhoused. But also, I guess we all acknowledge the mess that ends up on the street wherever the shelters often end up. And so it sounds like there's a plan to mitigate that. I'm wondering though if it's worthwhile changing the term to a shorter period so we can review this and just make sure that things are being, taken care of the way that we need them to be taken care of in the community. So the question is, could we shorten this to like a 1-year term that can be then renewed thereafter?
Thank you through the mayor to Councillor Frisch. And my colleagues in planning can speak to the temporary use permit options. The recommendation is to approve the temporary use permit for 3 years, and that the agreements are tied to that term. Council could, of course, direct staff to enter into a different length of term for an agreement. An example could be that the agreement is 1 or 2 years with 1 or 2 year sort of renewal options, very similar to what we have with another shelter location in community where staff come back on an annual basis to present a lease renewal. So that could be an option for council and then we can include those terms in the agreement.
Thanks for that.
And maybe as a follow-up to that question, that term was somewhat aligned, I think, with the Braidwood shelter, the purpose-built shelter. So I think the idea was this would be sort of a stopgap until that one, but maybe clarify it. Maybe I'm.
Sure. Thank you through to the mayor. Yes, the reason that the term was described in the report as such is because it is expected the Braidwood shelter would open in the fall of 2027. So if council wanted to reduce the agreement from 3 years, staff's recommendation would be to do it for 2 years with an optional 1-year renewal, just to account for delays, or also because to offer some additional winter shelter in that first season of shelter operations at Braidwood.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And Councillor Moore.
Thanks, Mayor. One of the letters that we received was from the Daycare Society. And I was just curious whether we'd had any reports in the past at this location from the daycare specifically, or anyone connected to the daycare. My understanding is that we didn't really receive any complaints, to my knowledge, when we were operating last year. So I'm just curious whether it sounds like it's more of a proactive kind of letter, like, just wanting communication and all those kinds of things. But just curious whether there has been any issues.
Through the mayor to Councillor Morin. Last year, we did not receive any communication from the daycare itself. We did have communication from 1 or 2 parents with concerns about what would happen, but we didn't have any concerns brought to our attention about actions that did occur. We did meet with the daycare and they expressed that they didn't see any significant or notable impacts last year, but of course raised what they would be worried about happening this year and what kinds of things we could do collectively to try and address those proactively. We met with 2 businesses and since that time have also had conversations with a 3rd business and a local strata. Last year, again, we heard from 1 or 2 businesses with specific concerns that we were able to address either through the city or lookout or bylaw, but no ongoing concerns raised last year. I think most of the concerns and frustrations expressed by community were about what's happening currently in community and a worry that the shelter would make things worse, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Morin and Councillor McCullough.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks to staff for this detailed report. One question I had just around the proposed use going forward versus what the neighborhood experienced last year. Is the overnight capacity for guests the same, or has there been a change at all to what we can accommodate overnight?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor McCullum. The capacity of the building has not changed. So last year, the capital improvements included the creation renovation of 2 washrooms. So the building capacity is 20. We are receiving, as outlined in the report, quotes to upgrade the water line. The building doesn't have the capacity to accommodate additional fixtures at this time. So we are receiving quotes to understand the cost implications of doing so. It's recommended, as noted in the report, that we approach BC Housing and our regional partners for funding to address those capital improvements, which would allow for the addition of a 3rd washroom, as well as a kitchenette. So there's no sink or facilities outside of the washrooms for staff or clients to use. And there's also some electrical upgrades that are required for the building. So the recommendation is that we pursue funding, and if funding is secured, that we go ahead with those upgrades. The change to occupancy, obviously, it will require a building permit, but it would have to come back to, we're recommending that if we can increase the occupancy, that it comes back to council for a decision about whether or not council wants to allow the shelter to accommodate what could be up to 30 people in the space. And that's also a recommendation in the report is currently staff are recommending limited hours because of the facility. To increase those hours, we're recommending we come back to council, or if we're able to make those improvements, council could direct us to address, to increase the hours of operation.
Yeah, thanks for that context. Yeah, in terms of the hours of operations, I think there's a real need and benefit to both the folks that need these services and also the wider community. As we know, Connect is very much at capacity in the winter months, and there is not a lot of places for people to be during the day to be out of the weather. So, but I do also agree with most of the factors that were laid out in the staff report, that there's just difficulty in running a 24-hour facility when it hasn't been set up that way. And I mean, this is kind of the problem that we find ourselves in, is that we're, trying to use this building in a temporary way. And a lot of the things that need fixing on it aren't really temporary measures, like adding washrooms to something that we're hoping is going to be in its permanent facility within the next 2 years. So we are kind of in a challenging spot that needs a bit of compromise, and perhaps that 16 hours a day is the compromise for the time being. I think the number of guests is very reasonable. I've had a couple of people I know that live in the neighborhood bring this up as a concern, and then I asked them if they knew that it had been used as an emergency shelter last year, and both of them were not aware of that. They thought that this was the first time that it was going to be used. So I think that does speak to the fact that it did, clearly other people noticed some impacts from it, not to diminish those, but it's unlikely to have more impacts than what we saw. And I think from what we've heard from both staff and the comments, that they're fairly acceptable when you balance the alternative as people sleeping out in the weather with nowhere to go. So I'm happy with what's in the report, and I do think that there's good reason to explore what type of upgrades we can do to better accommodate the people that need to use this. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Frisch.
Thanks. And a quick question to staff. I think I might know the answer, but if this goes off wonderfully without any issues, could the proponent come back to us asking to change this to 24 hours and make changes to the site in the future? Like midterm, for instance?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Frisch. So the recommendation in the report is that staff are directed to pursue funding for the capital upgrades regardless. And if we receive funding for those upgrades, that we would proceed with them. At this time, the report is written that in order for the shelter to change to 24/7, we would have to come back to council for council to authorize that change in the agreement. Council could decide if they would rather just give that authority to staff at this point. Should the upgrades be made, that they could proceed to 24/7, or we can come back to council for a direction at that time. And that's the same with the capacity at this point. The recommendation is that the capacity is limited at 20, even if a 3rd washroom is added, and that if there's a desire to increase capacity, it would come back to council.
Thank you. Well, I have a fairly cautious view of the permit to begin with, so I probably wouldn't be pushing for something like giving that authority to staff at this time. But what I would be interested in doing is changing the term to like a 1-year term with, you know, the option for as many as, doesn't really matter, I guess, 3 more options to renew for a year, so that if there are problems with the new shelter being built, that this can stay open as long as need be. But I guess I'll hold off to make that as an amendment and see if council have any other thoughts around my idea to change the term. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. I don't see any further questions, so I'll entertain a motion. Okay, Councillor McCollum and Councillor Moran have moved the recommended recommendation, and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, so I'll make I'll see if the amendment gets seconded. It sounds like it's not going to be, but I'd like to move that we amend the motion to create a contract for a 1-year term with 3 options to renew for another year each. And I don't hear a whole lot of action, so I'm sure it's going to die on the floor. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Frisch. Seeing no further questions or comments. Okay, absolutely.
Okay, sorry.
The amendment died on the floor though, so we're good. All right, back to the main motion as moved and is on the table. All those in favor? And motion carries. And I'll just make a bit of a comment because I know, again, this is something that has impacts in our community. And I've met with quite a number of folks in that area. And I've made the commitment to meet with people. That commitment is still there. And I'll still make the same recommendation as I did last year. If there are issues, make sure that those get reported to RCMP bylaw, whether it's an emergency 911 situation, or even if it's a non-emergency, making sure that information flows back. So then again, I think to Councillor Frisch's point, we have the ability to know if this is impacting the community. With that, we will move on to the official community plan review, recommended directions. I'll pass it over to Ms. Gothard.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council. I will be presenting this portion of the presentation, but I do want to recognize that we do have Adam Mattinson of BNA Studios. There I see him virtually attending. The BNA is the prime consultant retained on the OCP update, and they are working with Apple & Martin Engineering and City Squared Land Economists as well. So I'm going to be presenting, I have a little bit longer opening remarks than the other 2 reports, I'll just say that. So if you just want to settle in a little bit, but this is a 20-year plan. So hopefully you'll, give me that grace. I'll be presenting on the key findings and high-level recommendations of the OCP update process that started earlier this year and that are mandated to respond to provincial housing legislation. I'll next slide. Oh, I see that the slides are not up. Maybe I'll just see that they're coming up. That's okay. I can keep talking. So I'll provide a real brief recap of the phase 2 and where we are in the process, the key findings from the technical studies, the 9 big moves. That's what I'm going to spend my time on, and the next steps after that. So I think we're probably on slide 3 at this point. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it is a timeline graphic, so maybe I'll just start speaking, is that phase 2 is a formative stage in this 3/4 stage process, and it lays the groundwork for more detailed policy in the next phase, which phase 3 we're just about to begin. And it is informed by technical analysis, policy review, and public engagement. This work builds directly on the foundation of Courtenay's pretty recent 2022 OCP and response to new provincial legislation, which mandates that municipalities demonstrate capacity to meet 5- and 20-year housing needs. The vision, the goals, the cardinal directions of the existing OCP are all continue to inform this ongoing work. So the foundation of the OCP are not changing in that regard. And that's because a lot of engagement, 3 years of it nearly, went on to create the 2022 OCP. Next slide. There's 6 core areas that were examined in the technical analysis listed here. I think that's actually a little bit more than 6, but that's also engagement there. These studies were contemplated by public and interest holder engagement, including webinars, pop-up events, feedback forms, and targeted interest holder consultations. And I'll be talking about some of these studies. Next slide. So some key findings, very high level here. There's quite a lengthy report, attachment number 1, that goes with this. So a lot of more detail in there. But as we know, OCP is to be based on the housing needs report population projections, which estimate that Courtenay will grow by another approximately 10,000 people by 2041, and we're currently at around 32,000, and so that would bring us up to around 41,000. And this projects about 8,300 new homes. Population projections are continuously being revised all the time. That's one reason why the 5-year planning cycle is what many of us think is a very good idea, to just keep understanding those population changes. So I just have to provide that caveat because yeah, we don't quite know exactly who's all going to move here. Land capacity findings. The July report this year demonstrated that Courtenay has sufficient zoned capacity to meet its 20-year housing needs with a surplus of over 3,000 units. The land capacity analysis also confirmed that the urban framework concept of the 2022 OCP remains viable. So this includes directing the majority of the growth into 7 primary and secondary growth centers with more incremental residential intensification across the majority of Courtenay's residential lands, those being the traditionally lower density neighborhoods. A key difference since the 2022 OCP is the provincial requirement to allow the minimum of 4 residential dwellings on all traditional single residential lots. And therefore the city's land capacity analysis shows the potential for more housing in those land uses than the original 2022 OCP. And so this means that we can meet projected demand without expanding the city's boundaries in this OCP review cycle or adding any new town or neighborhood centers within the city's boundaries. In regards to infrastructure, while the land is available from a permissions perspective, and that is what the legislation requires, infrastructure upgrades are needed, particularly at the key lift stations and in water pressure zones. Strategic coordination with the RD, with BC Transit, those are essential to support growth. And as the City Council already knows, the DCC bylaw, development cost charges, is currently being updated presently to address a number of these infrastructure needs related to growth. Regarding the financial analysis, development viability is increasingly challenged by rising construction costs and especially underground parking, often required for higher density. And I'll discuss this in a little more detail in one of the big moves, because I know we're all very interested to know about the amenity cost charges, the inclusionary zoning, and the density bonusing powers of the new legislation. And then on the housing policy, the current OCP includes policy on legislatively defined housing needs, but adjustments are needed in this regard to recognize the full housing spectrum need. It's a very complex topic, and I'll just say a little bit more about that shortly. So collectively, these findings underscore the importance of aligning land use infrastructure and financial tools to support sustainable growth. I'll talk about that as well. Big move number 1. So next slide. So we've identified 9 strategic directions, big moves to guide the next, the policy refinement phase. Many cut across numerous, next slide, numerous thematic policy sections of the OCP and across departments and services provided. Because the existing OCP is a strong foundation, they are presented as directions to work differently with existing tools to support more integrated and effective implementation, as well as in some moves, detailed policies are presented. So I'm going to touch on key points. And again, attachment number 1 has a lot more information. Next slide. So the first one is about aligning the corporate efforts to support proactive planning cycle. The provincial legislation requires that municipalities regularly update those housing needs reports, OCPs, and zoning bylaws every 5 years. And this shift demands a more coordinated and proactive approach to planning across departments and jurisdictions. So in addition to establishing the 5-year planning cycle for those tools I just mentioned, which is required, the expectation and I guess really the opportunity for the city is to align infrastructure servicing plans, development cost charges, amenity cost charges, programs, and capital budgets with growth scenarios, and to get into an iterative cycle of refining these plans and financial tools all together to calibrate them collectively to those emerging population needs, which would be examined every 5 years. So the image here builds on the OCP implementation cycle created for the 2022 OCP bylaw. And at that time, we created an image that shows mainly the OCP in blue and then the orange circles there. And then we added the provincial planning cycle context and internal planning steps in blue and green to just show how this kind of cog could continuously be moving over time. I know it probably looks intimidating and like a lot of additional work, but it's actually a coordinated alignment of the existing processes the city already works with and places them within a predictable cycle and into an overall local government service delivery framework. And this can allow for more incremental and perennial review of plans and policies, so more iterative work and maybe less big lurches in work if, as maybe we're not studying something for a long time, all of a sudden we study it, all of a sudden there's a lot of new information there. But this iterative approach ideally can be quite incremental. The second big move is refining land use policies based on growth management principles. So Courtenay's current land use designations are generally aligned with the provincial expectations, but the technical analysis shows that some refinements are needed. This includes making minor amendments to the existing land use designations to better reflect infrastructure capacity and anticipated housing demand. And specifically, this refers to these 5, I know the slide's a little bit hard to read. I know you have this image in your reports, but 5 local area plan areas being the Lake Trail area, the McPhee area, the air park being the first priority. That's established OCP policy already. Those are all on the west side, and then 2 local area plan areas for areas of growth in the lower Ryan, and much further down the road in many years, the Anderton local area plan as well. And then we definitely working with Crown Isle on their master plan, quite an old master plan, just updating it to reflect some of these new realities and their contribution to housing. And as part of that master plan, so that bubble there, but the Crown Isle master plan there is a proposal to expand the town center designation a little bit in that area into the urban residential area, so that it's not the creation of a new town center, but just slight boundary changes. And then there's 4 administrative housekeeping revisions in there. The other part of this big move is to establish a clearer framework for future municipal boundary extensions in alignment with the regional growth strategy. So the last OCP, this OCP does not ask for boundary extensions, but we know it's better to get ahead of that conversation and give uncertainty into which areas beyond our boundaries we want to grow next. So this OCP would give some direction on that, and it would introduce a standardized framework for local area plans to make sure that we're getting that detailed community-driven visions and voice down in those local areas that I just identified. Proposal is for 2 to 3 of these to be done every 5-year cycle. And again, that sounds like a lot of work, but once those LAPs are established, then they transition into plan refinement processes over time. And we would continue to monitor and update development permit areas, including potential new ones for flood and wildfire hazards, and also just reflecting the restrictive overlays with the Comox Airport and Airbase, although their zoning bylaws being updated as well, which is expected to be more permissive than it is today. Big move 3, clarifying OCP land use policies to guide zoning bylaw updates. So as we know, 20 years of housing must be zoned for. And in this occurring, this means that rezoning applications are not as common as they used to be. And people used to have a chance of having a public hearing and having a say. And actually, one of the requirements of the new legislation is that for residential rezonings where they are still applied for, they may not have a public hearing. So this places greater importance on ensuring that the OCP is clearly communicating expectations for built form density land use at that time of public consultation, so that it can inform the zoning. So actions here recommended are defining minimum and maximum densities, heights, typologies for each land use. Presently, the designations are quite broad in describing built form and do not provide clarity on those densities. And then you can just see in the table here, there's the proposals, a density range, and then a concordance table to show which zones match to land use designations. This is quite frankly getting more into the nitty gritty of supporting staff to be able to provide clarity to applicants. And this move also includes setting up the clarity of what development rights within growth centers would be permitted as of right versus what would be available for density bonus amenity requirements. And I'm going to say more about that very, very soon. Next one, this big move would be somewhat of a new area of work for us, but is monitoring development market conditions regularly to ensure policy relevance. So we're learning that development viability is increasingly challenged by rising costs, especially for higher density projects that may require underground parking and consolidating multiple sites. The legislation for it has enabled a couple new financial tools, the amenity cost charges, density bonusing, inclusionary zoning. And those tools must be calibrated in order to avoid deterring housing delivery. And that's the same direction for development cost charge bylaws as well. So I can confirm that the development cost charge program and the rates that have been presented to council this past summer and the amenity cost charge program and rates that will be presented at the next council meeting, that both those bylaws that they are meeting that they are viable within the financial analysis that's been done. So let me tell you a little bit more about this analysis. So this analysis is really critical to understanding the viability of the new affordable housing tools that I just mentioned. And the province provided the new powers of inclusionary zoning and amenity cost contributions as more transactional and predictable forms of amenity contributions for new development, rather than amenities being negotiated on a case-by-case basis through traditional forms of rezoning applications. So the development financial analysis for Courtenay was based on nearly 20 case studies, and it's concluded that given the current costs associated with delivering housing, that DCC rates recommended are viable. So that's already what I said. And that a modest amenity cost charge in the range of $4,000 per unit is supportable and allows for new funding stream to ensure Courtenay has parks and recreational amenities critical to supporting high quality of life for existing and new residents. So that's $4,000 per unit. And then the inclusionary zoning is not currently viable in most areas due to land economics at this time, but the recommendation is to monitor that opportunity over time. However, the density bonus levy opportunity is supportable and can help deliver affordable housing. So what's proposed is a financial rate of, and this work still needs a more refinement, but in the range of $10 to $20 a square foot on the 2 stories above a 4-story base density in the multi-residential uses within the growth node. So it's quite a mouthful that I'm saying right there, but basically what we're just recognizing is that there's an opportunity to have a density bonus provision in our zoning bylaw that would mean that in exchange for more density that the developer gets to develop and put on the market, that they would be generating money to be put into an affordable housing reserve fund that could be used subject to city policy. And so that's how those various tools work together. And if there's some more questions on that, I know Adam can provide more detail. There's a few other recommended actions: maintaining regular engagement with the development community to understand those local conditions and how they're changing, and doing those regular financial feasibility tests. With regards to housing, the big move is to develop tailored housing strategies to reflect diverse community needs. So we need those 8,300 new units by 2041. And there's that significant demand for below market rental, senior and special needs housing, really the below market being a really critical one. A one size fits all approach won't meet this diversity, and the technical report identifies as the range of trade-offs that a community has to contemplate as they consider which municipal tools to use to support housing. So some of these key recommendations for housing is to apply the density bonus policy that I described above. The second is to create a Courtenay-specific affordable housing strategy that dovetails with the Regional District Housing Action Plan and defines the city's role in affordable housing. And this is seen as, the timing seems very good for this because there's these emerging contexts that we have. The emerging services of the local level, the Comox Valley Regional District housing entities focused on non-market rental, part of the housing continuum, helps us to understand in our valley, you know, that there's that opportunity that's currently being forged. We have this regional housing action plan that's being developed. There's the regional homelessness assessment and plan and the regional winter shelter. And then all of that, there's, you know, the federal Canada builds and all that. So that context is changing. And so this action plan would be specifically about being more clear on the lane that the city of Courtenay can and should operate in. So just really understanding where we fit in and can target our efforts in that continuum. Part of this action is also clarifying housing targets and definitions across the continuum. I know there was some confusion when the housing target order came out and how does it relate to our housing needs report. So just providing good communications on that. Strengthening partnerships is clearly needed. And then we'd look at expanding incentives and renter protection tools, including renter tenure zoning and expedited approvals. Regarding infrastructure, big move is that it match growth in the land use context. So while Courtenay has sufficient zone land to meet housing targets, the infrastructure systems are, particularly water and sewer, are not yet aligned with this, and strategic investment is needed. So the recommended actions are to update the DCC bylaw. That is happening right now, so that's great. Aligning infrastructure upgrades with housing delivery timelines and aligning regionally with all, you know, the CBRD has a DCC bylaw as well, and KFN we expect may have some development aspirations as well on their lands. So that regional approach to infrastructure, and then strengthening asset management practices and regional coordination again. And this other one, leveraging new servicing authorities under Bill 16. This is a new tool I think we probably haven't talked to council much about. We're still researching it, but is this new ability to expand offsite infrastructure requirements such as road dedication, frontage infrastructure, and transportation demand management even. These are new authorities previously only available through subdivision, which could be available through building permit as well. A big move 7. There are only 9, so I'm getting there, is to modernize the approach to parks, open spaces, and amenities. As Courtenay densifies, the access to high quality parks and amenities becomes essential for livability and equity. Current provision rates are below target and unserved areas do need attention. Recommended actions are to expand park acquisition strategies, such as I just mentioned the amenity cost charges to fund recreation and cultural amenities. Improve accessibility and distribution of parks, especially in East Courtenay, and focus on programming to improve the quality and the variety of the park experiences, and to convert underutilized spaces into community assets with a focus on placemaking and connection with opportunities through the neighborhood networks work that's concurrent in another department. And in essence, this acknowledges we're providing public spaces within an increasing urban context. And speaking about that urban context, the big move 8 is integrating green infrastructure with natural asset management. So urbanization definitely places pressure on natural systems. There's no question about that. Climate resilience and ecological health depend on integrating green infrastructure into land use and servicing strategies, including with the public open spaces I just mentioned. So this would include coordinating the environmental tools across the variety of our departments. So we have a lot of environmental protection and oriented types of policies and tools, but they are not together assessed and designed in order to kind of reinforce and support each other. That is an opportunity we've identified. Monitoring land cover changes and impervious surfaces over time. So again, that's just becoming more data oriented about our planning practices, in this case to understand our ecological systems. It would include improving maintenance protocols for green infrastructure, which is a newer infrastructure still for the city, and linking them to asset management systems. And this includes strategies to encourage public to manage natural assets on private land, or even participating in the management on public land. And finally, the big move 9, establishing a community engagement and partnership framework. So with that shift away from public hearings for rezonings, early and consistent engagement becomes critical to building trust and transparency in decisions. These actions include embedding regular cycles of engagement into 5-year planning cycle. This could take the form of regular engagement touch points with the public in which a range of city projects are discussed at the same time. I can speak personally that doing pop-ups anywhere, even if we're advertising for OCP, people want to talk about what they want to talk about. And I think we could do more to respond to that so that people who come with a question about maybe one topic, they can access more staff and understand about more projects at the same time. And then another recommendation, track and report on growth trends and planning outcomes annually to build that shared understanding of where our community is going and how it's changing. And finally, those dedicated online portals for the general public. We've already created one for the development community. I'll just say that we're very actively working with the development community because they're a key partner in the delivery of housing. We have an online portal now, and we can do more of that for other interest holders as well. So the next steps in this process are your feedback tonight. Feedback from the public will inform the actual bylaw of changes. We'll be hosting a public open house on October 20th. There'll be 2 sessions that day. Interest holder workshops will also be occurring later in the month. Developer meeting on October 21st. And then hopefully we're getting that bylaw presented for first reading by the end of the year and the public hearing into the new year. So thank you for your time with my long opening remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Thanks for that detailed presentation. Much appreciated. And we have a question or comment. Councillor McCollum.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. You packed a lot in there. I have a few different questions, so I'll just start at the top and maybe I'll jump in and out so I'm not taking over the mic. So for the local area plans that were identified, that was a great infograph kind of laying out where the more immediate local area plans should be developed and then what the work plan is further down the line. And I guess my first question around that is, given that this is the approach that we're taking, we've identified quite a number of areas in Courtenay that could use a local area plan. Are we going to then put these into a work plan so that we have, I mean, we have it with, active transportation design where we have, an allocation that there's a certain amount of resources that are going, that are dedicated every year for doing that work. And, given that this is a new identified need, I guess, it's good to identify it in the OCP, but if we're not funding it and putting it in a work plan, it's a question mark as to whether or not we ever get to it. So just, Mayor.
Oh, sorry. I thought your mic was still on.
Mayor to Councillor McCollum. So yes, absolutely. Staff are already, I guess, getting in the spirit of the proactive planning cycle, and we have to project those needs 5 years out, 5-year financial plan. So that is the intent. Obviously, every single council gets to make a decision on the financial plan and the budget, but we're turning our minds to layering it in as defined services to provide.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. And then for a different conversation at a further meeting is just understanding what that cost would be and how we would resource that. And then just to follow up on the same topic, I noticed that the south lands that we're currently looking to extend sewer service to is not identified for a local area plan. I just wonder if you wanted to speak to that, because it seemed that seems like an open question to me as what that area is going to look like over the next 10 years. And wondering if that was discussed at all through this process and why it's not on there.
Yeah, it's a great question through the mayor to Councillor McCollum. So the south, yes, a lot of attention with the sewer, the city working on sewer project, the regional district also providing a lot of attention in recent years. This is actually gets really at that point I raised about the regional growth strategy and understanding the next settlement expansion areas. That's the technical word for where the municipalities may grow into. And so, yeah, the intent was, I mean, one day we will have to create more town center. I mean, assuming we continue to grow. So that is an assumption. That's not always the case. But if that remains the case, then finding those new centers and being logical and thoughtful about it is the South is definitely an area that could be next on that list.
Excellent. Yeah, and just if you keep your mic on, otherwise it gets a little confusing on this because you get in between the other speakers. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I had a question about density bonuses, and I guess it sounds like we should call them density fees. And I guess the question I have is, are we certain that developers make more money if they add more floors? And so is there a chance we might be disincentivizing density by charging? And how do we find that number, right? And might it work for some developments but not others? So I don't know how deeply we've contemplated that at this point. I realize it's also very early stages and you're probably just introducing it to us, but that's my question for now.
Yeah, I'll have to recognize that the land economics part is not something I have the deepest of technical expertise in. We have very good people working on it. I can say this much, that and maybe Adam, this is where he might be able to continue some of my response, but we by law cannot disincentivize the base density that must be provided in order to meet the 20-year housing needs. So in the financial assessment that was done, there was an assumption of what those base densities across the city must be. And then the land economist, Andrea Rennie, she very intentionally is looking at what is that magic number, and somewhere between $10 and $20 per square foot. It depends on where it is in the city and kind of the development context of the proposal. But in her calculations, it looks as though that could still be enough of a sweet spot to incentivize the additional density, get those homes, and then bring in, I mean, for lack of a better word, it almost kind of becomes like a levy, but I mean, there's an exchange of density for the money. So it's the developers getting something from there too. So yeah, I guess at a high level, to just say that consideration's been factored into the analysis. If Adam has more to provide on that, maybe I'll just see if he wants to put up his hand.
Sure, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds. I realize this is early stages, and presumably you'll continue studying this stuff as you make recommendations, because this isn't the final table, right? It's not like, or is this it? These are the numbers that you want to propose we go with.
Thank you for the follow-up question, because it allows me to say a little bit more about our process. So we are going to be sharing this information with the development community October 21st. We'll be circulating in advance. This is now all public information. So understanding their feedback in their response to these numbers is really important. This is a qualified professional that's generated these findings, and so the refinement is potential. There's potential for refinement in there, I guess, is to answer your question. That is a possibility.
Yeah. Okay, and so to apply this to some of the developments that have happened recently, I think we just passed a 5-story, or was it 6? But something like that going in, we would just automatically be charging extra for that next floor up on top of the base 4 stories.
I see that Adam has his hand up, and maybe I'll let him start and we'll see if I finish. So yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Yes, thank you, Nancy. I'd say you did a great job of summarizing up front there, and through the mayor to Councillor Fish. The intent is for the policy analysis to try and represent as best as we can understand, based on all the inputs and our understanding of the costs in Courtenay, which our consultant Andrea Rennie has done a great job and has already done some preliminary consultation with members of Courtenay's development industry to understand what that uplift is compared to what the current density permissions are as of right in various areas across the community. As Nancy mentioned, there are about 20 different case studies we looked at, different built forms, different locations. And to your question there about the additional 5 or 6, we are seeing some rezonings that have come through and enabled that additional density beyond what would otherwise be permitted in the community. This testing and this tool is effectively considering an alternative to what would otherwise be done through a community amenity contribution negotiation through a rezoning process that the community has done in the past. And this is intended to provide a bit more clarity on what the ask would be if you were to go through a rezoning. So effectively, we're looking to develop zones with the development community's input that provide that clarity about, okay, if the council or the community is going to allow you to build this additional density, there is an amount of land value that's effectively created above and beyond the cost for adding that extra density, those extra floors and everything that comes along with it. What's a reasonable ask to offset the costs of the impact of that density is adding to the community? And that is where these numbers are preliminarily coming from based on that analysis right now. We are looking to, as Nancy mentioned, to refine this based on our feedback, which we will be having a working session with members of the development community on the 21st of October is what we currently have scheduled. And we're hoping to provide additional guidance based on the feedback we receive there.
Excellent. Thanks for that.
Thanks, Councillor Fish and Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. I know this has been sort of covering more of the kind of technical aspects of this review. I'm going to bring kind of the people part of it into this. I want to bring up some things that I'm wondering if there can be a response around how we kind of integrate more of that, you know, together with this. And I know we have the neighborhood network strategy happening, and lots of really great, or beginning, and there's lots of really great things around community building and celebrating assets in neighborhoods, etc. But I think, you know, it's not even so much the elephant in the room. I think we all know that density is important for a lot of different reasons, but we also know that there are neighborhoods that are going to be more impacted than others. And I guess I'm wondering about the approaches in terms of sensitivity to that, because some of these neighborhoods are going to be gentrified. And I think that's a real concern for many people. And I think how we communicate out the vision is really important. I know the public engagement piece is in there, and I think because of, you know, not opportunities for public hearings, which is not necessarily the best way of engaging with people anyway, I think has created a lot of angst and anxiety. And it is primarily in the west side of Courtenay, those older neighborhoods that are feeling that more. So I guess, I know I've brought it up before around how we can support those neighborhoods to feel like they're not being kind of, you know, left behind in a way, or many folks who live in those older neighborhoods with very modest houses, etc., are very happy. They don't want big homes anyway. So densification, the idea of having smaller units isn't necessarily an issue. But in terms of keeping, you know, when trees are coming down adjacent, what can we do to keep that neighborhood feel? And you know, when I know I bring this up a lot, but this is my frame of reference. When I worked in schools, when the new schools would be built, we would talk about how they just didn't really have a lot of character or culture, or as much. It took a long time to build a sense of belonging, whereas those old schools had more of that culture. And so I guess I'm just curious how we incorporate that in. I know we have a lot of great plans happening around this, around the periphery of this, but how can we do things better so that we can, I think, respond to that sense of loss? And this brings up a lot of emotion in neighborhoods. And there are often folks who understand that we need density, we need housing for people. So yeah, I know that was kind of an abstract commentary and questions, but I'm just wondering if there's a way that you can respond to that that would help me to feel confident that we're we're going to address those concerns. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Through the mayor to Council Moran. Yeah, I'd say staff are very aware of that. The relationship to the public has changed with some of that new legislation, and changes are coming. I mean, when the 4 units per every single residential lot mandate came down, that is really changing a lot of the fabric. You know, we don't expect any one street to change overnight, but yes, our neighborhoods are changing. I know certainly in the 2022 OCP update, we did try to message that we are the types, the growth scenarios that are envisioned in that plan and this plan means we are changing. Courtenay's changing. There's an urbanizing piece that's happening. So just trying, I think, to be on the same page with that. But how do we do urbanization so that it's not crowding, that it can remain delightful? Some of the reasons why the profession of planning emerged was to make sure that, you know, people can still be livable in those higher densities. You know, that intention of getting at the people part and hearing the people's voices is the reason why that big move 9 is in there. So something about regular patterns of engagement, maybe also the neighborhood network work happening is a great opportunity for that too. I mean, initially I would say, you know, the planner's toolkit, you know, there's the design guidelines with forming character, et cetera. I have to be really frank that the messaging from the province, and as we listen to the financial feasibility elements, is really the, you know, all that extra design that can, you know, create roadblocks. So anyway, this is kind of the context we're in right now. I just trying to acknowledge that on one hand, we're getting messaging from the province not to have design guidelines, and yet design guidelines are things that can help with some of what you're talking about. With regards to gentrification, you know, that can often, you know, kind of like a negative word, can displace people, you know, the rising land values, et cetera. And certainly with, at least for renters there, maybe, you know, there's this additional tool, rent protections, that we could look at that I mentioned. I think maybe this is almost more of a kind of philosophical comment, is just that comment of that neighborhood feel, whatever it is. We could be more intentional at uncovering what that means for people. So once we understand what those elements really are important in that community, we could work to have strategies to protect and enhance them. But again, I think it is all within the context of an urbanizing, changing Courtenay. I mean, it's urbanizing across the province. So I guess, you know, I wanted to just mention that part of it being more intentional and uncovering is that those processes, those, you know, I mean, I led them myself, community workshops, et cetera. You know, we can talk to people about what's really important at that street level that gives that feeling of that character. So I notice our city manager has the mic on as well.
Well, thank you, through the mayor. I really appreciate the question, Councillor Moran. During our UBCM meeting with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, this issue was raised, that the communications that the municipalities are responsible for, and that I would say, handcuffs. I'm a professional planner by training, and my colleague is as well, and we've been struggling with some of the legislative changes. I think my experience in how to address that is you need to be really honest. And this is required. These changes are going to happen in neighborhoods, and we'll do our best. But we cannot suggest, based on the framework that the province has required of us as municipalities, that we'll be able to protect that. And all of the things that the flip side of protections, as Ms. Goddard referenced, many people are see that as barriers. They add costs and variety of things. So in the current environment that we live in and operate in, and the legal requirements that the municipality has, I think we need that intentionality needs to be really clear what we can and can't do. And that remains with the province, and they've given that direction. And perhaps with the speed of change that we've had in the last 3 years, maybe in the next 3 years, there'll be some changing back in that way. But based on all the messaging that we've heard amongst our profession, that is not the case. And so being, I think, very clear, open and honest with neighborhoods that the future is going to be not what the present is, especially in that landform. And some of the topics that had been highlighted or desires by neighborhoods will not be possible by the city. So I think the best way to be is upfront on that. And it's difficult for our staff. It's difficult for you as elected officials, and it's very difficult in neighborhoods. But there are certain things we can control, but the province has taken some of that control out of our hands. But sorry about that.
Just a quick follow-up.
Mm.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think I really liked your comment around, just that piece around the public. The more we can connect with the folks in neighborhoods and exactly, I don't know, can't remember your quote around what does that mean? Like, what does community or whatever, I can't remember your quote, mean to them? And how, what can we do within the control that we have to really look at that, to support people so that they feel heard and not left behind. I guess I'm hearing a lot of being left behind or not listened to, not necessarily specifically by our staff or anything like that, but just in a general sense. And I guess my last point would be that those of us who, are, most of us here, I think, understand the social context and the social infrastructure piece, and resilient communities have to have sense of belonging in neighborhoods. You can't just, and that's what we have in our OCP. It's running all through it, all that really good stuff. So I just want to make sure that we can try to do the best we can to communicate out that we hear people and that we're going to do whatever we can within the confines that we have to keep those neighborhoods as close to, keep that culture there. Thanks.
Right, thanks, Councillor Morin and Councillor McCullough.
Yeah, thanks again. Yeah, I also had just a couple of questions around the density bonusing. Yeah, I do understand that this is to a degree an economic analysis, and that that's basically we're just trying to figure out the math of what those extra stories are worth and make it really clear. And to me, that seems like can provide certainty in a development process to a developer, that they can look at a lot and understand what the maximum potential is and what that additional cost would be. So if we get the math right on that, it seems like it's a benefit to possibly both sides of that equation. One question I did have, and this is just something I've heard a few times recently when we've met with developers, is that the economics around 6-story buildings has changed with the building code update. And I've heard it repeated a couple times. I don't know any of the details of it, but wondering, Adam, if you understand that statement when I'm saying it in any context, and whether or not those changes are being brought into our economic analysis of what the value of those additional stories would be.
Yes, thank you for the question. Through the mayor to Councillor McCullough, that is something we are also hearing, and that is something we have incorporated to the best of our ability into our analysis, recognizing that changes to step code, building code, they place new challenges, engineering and structural, that add costs to many developers, and just recognizing that Courtenay has a unique context when it comes to the type of product that people are willing to buy, the built form that the community expects. And so that is an interesting breakpoint that we are seeing between 5 and 6 stories. That it is just the engineering of the elevators, stairwells, everything that comes along with it. It's challenging to make a building pencil. And was mentioned before in the presentation, particularly when we talk about parking requirements, that when you start having to look at adding below grade parking, that really starts to break a developer's pro forma, the return they need to make, that the project makes any money, frankly, at all, for them to move forward at that point. Even for nonprofits, frankly, it becomes very challenging. And so that is something we have factored in, and that is reflected in the numbers that you are seeing in those preliminary numbers there. And it is part of the analysis that we're continuing to work through, as well as part of our negotiations and our discussions and engagement with the development community, because we do also see a lot of developers in the community that are finding innovative ways to make development work despite the challenges. And we're hoping to understand this better to make sure that at the end of the day, when we bring a policy recommendation forward, that it will work for as many types of development across the housing spectrum, so that we can ensure that we're getting all those types of housing that the community has envisioned as part of this plan.
That's great to hear, and I'm reassured that that is part of the analysis. I know that the development landscape is changing all the times in terms of costs and regulations. So I'm glad to know that that's gone into it, and I realize that we haven't landed on numbers, and clearly this type of analysis is way beyond my skill set. So I'm glad that we have people that know how to go about it. I had another question on the density bonus, more on the policy side, and it was laid out that, you know, the I don't know what the table's gone, but what that cost is, whatever we're calling that the city would receive for the additional square feet. I'm sure I'll learn a new acronym or some new terminology soon. Oh, now it's hidden. What is it?
Oh, it was
Yeah.
just confirming, this is the slide you were
Yeah,
referring to?
Yeah, the density bonus interim rate. I assume that one day it won't be called interim. It'll just be called the rate. Yeah, that we were talking about, or you referred to it as funding that would go into an affordable housing fund. I'm wondering if other jurisdictions that have brought this policy in have also used it for other types of amenities. I'm just thinking around community centers and rec centers that, you know, the more that we do this type of development, the higher the need is. And as far as I know, we're not able to do DCCs, and we haven't landed on any ACAs, more acronyms yet. So I just want to flag that there is likely some value in considering other community needs in addition to housing, especially given that these will be, you know, more likely centrally located and creating additional demand on our facilities. So I hope that we'll give some thought to that as well, and as we roll this out.
All right, Adam, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you through the mayor to Councilor McCullough. Just to respond to that comment, I just want to assure you that we have also looked at the ACCs as an additional cost. It is also factored into this analysis, so we are considering those. And you're absolutely right that there are other things that the density bonus can be put towards beyond affordable housing. Based on the development economics in Courtenay right now and the pressure that we're seeing in the need for affordable housing, it is currently our recommendation that the bulk of this be put towards affordable housing right now, because when it comes to DCCs and ACCs, they are legislated. They're very specific in what they can and cannot be put towards. So, for example, DCCs and ACCs can contribute towards parks and facilities, for example. Whereas when we talk about affordable housing, that is not something that can be. That is specifically either a density bonus or inclusionary zoning, which is a different tool, which functions a different way. And based on our analysis right now, doesn't work in most places in Courtenay, unfortunately, right now. That's typically when you see much more urban communities where that tool can potentially work. So to just give you the assurance, we are looking at all the tools working in concert with each other right now as we understand them. But at the same time, if we were to use a density bonus as part of the testing right now, this gives you an idea of a value that we could charge, and it will be up to the council to determine how to direct staff to develop the bylaws as to how to allocate that funding if we were to structure it that way.
Thanks. Yeah, that's really helpful reminder that there are some other tools for most other things, but definitely housing is sitting on its own. So yeah, thanks for highlighting that. And there's no other lights on. I have one other
Keep going.
thing. It's a long presentation, so I have lots of comments. Yeah, just on the regular engagement as part of, I think that was the last bullet that you landed on. I think that that's really important, especially as was already discussed, that we have fewer tools available to us about individual development. And when we're getting that regular engagement with the community, we can guide that some of this beyond these kind of case by case basis. And in that regard, I just wanted to put a plug in for integrating maybe some regular community engagement into annual community events that happen around town. I've been really impressed to see the way that the engagement has been done with the solid waste master plan at the regional district. They've gone to fall fairs on, you know, the various islands that the service reaches. And I think that that's what we could develop as, part of this improved engagement is just regular things in the calendar where we're available for the community to come and talk about what matters and what's happening in their neighborhood and what is, rolling out at the city, whether it's capital projects or local area plans or what have you. I think that, it's a lot of work for staff to put on these open houses and engagement where it's on one topic and we're trying to do enough, PR to have people come in and talk to us about one item, but just being where people are already out and about seems like an easy win. And I'll stop talking now.
Excellent. Well, it looks like we've gone through most of the questions and answers, so there is a motion. Are there any further questions or comments? See none, all those in favor? And motion carries. I think what we'll do now is we'll maybe take a bit of a break. Our dinner is in the other room cooling, so we'll come back in about 20 minutes, which is about 6:15. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are going to continue on with our regular council meeting. We are on item 5.2.1, the audit service plan for the year ending December 31st, 2025. And I will pass it over to Mr. Lagenmeyer.
Nice to be here once again. This will be a quick one. I'm hoping council will approve MNP as the city's auditor for 2025. They've audited us for many years. Their rate is similar. Their work appears to be good. And they can fit us into their schedule, which is probably the biggest key element there. If approved, the interim audit will commence in a couple of weeks where they do internal control testing, and then they return in about March to do the year-end procedures. And with that, I'm open to any questions.
Fantastic. Thanks for the very detailed report. And with that, I'll pass it over to Councilor McCollum.
Can't resist asking a question here. Something that has occurred to me over the years, because of course, MNP does the audits for most of the local government in our community, it seems. And as far as I can tell, every year that I've been on council, they have also done the audit. And one of the risks in an audit is familiarity. I'm sure you're aware. And just wondering if you, how that can be addressed when we have the same auditors with much familiarity.
With much familiarity. So that does run into a challenge. What we do have is a consistent partner, but we have rotation through the staff that are doing the work, which always helps. Within the Canadian auditing standards, there are requirements, checklists, and items that you must do. Any auditor can be, not as in depth, but there are standards and procedures in place to ensure that they do this. I recognize that MNP does a lot of municipal work, but it's also because that's what they focus in. You'll find accounting firms like their area because that's where their expertise is in, so they can become efficient and they know exactly what to look for. So at times it may seem that you're staying with the same group, but you're also staying with a group that is an expert in that field.
All right. Thanks for the excellent question and the excellent answer. And we do have a motion if somebody would like to move it. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And motion carries. Thanks very much for that. And next on the agenda, we have the Cliff Avenue 5th Street intersection review. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Garvey.
Thank you. Through Mayor to Council. Council may recall that this has been I would say, quite a long-standing item of interest. And when we updated the strategic plan in our last meeting, this was identified in the 10 priority areas that information will be coming ahead. And so through Mr. Shaw and Mr. Casey, we'll have a conversation with council about options. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the mayor to council, a brief introduction. Our city manager touched on the part that I wanted to touch on as well about the strategic plan and this initiative's relevance to that. So I will, without further delay, I will introduce Mr. Casey from Urban Systems, who worked with staff to develop the options analysis and the analytical review of this particular corridor and this intersection with respect to pedestrian mobility and a fourth leg crossing at the intersection of 5th and Cliff. With that, Mr. Casey, thank you.
Great. Thank you both for the introduction, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here again tonight. I'm very happy to be presenting out here on our work we've done at the Cliff and 5th intersection. So the objective for this piece of work was to identify options to improve pedestrian crossing safety and comfort. So the specific focus here was on opportunities to enhance the pedestrian experience and safety through this location, but with some broader consideration given to not only just the pedestrian experience, but also some of the impacts that some of these options that I'm going to present here might have. So a bit more of a broader look at improvement options for this location. The work included overview of the intersection, getting to kind of understand how it operates today and some of the design features and flaws perhaps as well. We went through a series of options that were identified and sort of tested through
criteria to determine which sort of best achieve the intended outcomes from this exercise. Look through traffic analysis, signal infrastructure, and intersection infrastructure analysis, as well as some sort of softer factors to evaluate the various opportunities here, and then made a series of recommendations on what we believe the best course of action here would be. So a little bit here on existing conditions. The intersection, for the purpose of the work we're doing here, Cliff Avenue has been considered to be oriented north-south. 5th Street to be east-west. There's about 15,000 vehicles per day on the south leg, the busy leg of Cliff, about 22,000 on the east leg, the busy leg of 5th. Some of the defining features pertinent to the work we're doing here on the northbound approach, so Cliff Avenue. There's a channelized right turn that's facilitated by it's called a pork chop island that separates out the right turn from the through movements. It results in an additional crossing leg for a crossing pedestrian on that piece of cliff. There are crossings available to pedestrians on 3 of the intersection legs. So on the north, west, and south, there is no crossing currently provided on the east leg, which is the busy leg of 5th. And then you'll notice if you spend time out there that quite heavy dominant movements in the northbound right and the corresponding westbound left. And so that is facilitated with greater signal green time given to facilitate those movements, which does come at the disbenefit of added delay for opposing vehicle turn movements, as well as pedestrian crossings that might be happening and concurrent with those movements as well. Just a couple photos on the screen here. Photo on the left is oriented south and east, so looking toward 5th Street Bridge and as well south on Cliff, really showing that pork chop island that's in place to facilitate the channelized northbound right. And then the image on the right is looking essentially due north, which is straight up Cliff through the intersection, again looking at that channelized right and seeing some of the specific traffic control that's in place to facilitate that the northbound right turn. So we identified a series of options, again, specific to the objectives of this exercise, which were to identify how better to accommodate safe and comfortable pedestrian crossing. There's 5 options over on the screen in front of us. Those are the ones that were sort of put through this multi-criteria evaluation to determine which would be most beneficial in this location. We've also identified as a series of sort of supporting opportunities, things that aren't necessarily integral to any one option, but could be pursued on top of some of these primary options as well. So things around public space and placemaking, accessible design, those sorts of things that could be layered on to any of these options. So the 5 options, the first was a pedestrian scramble, which if you've seen this in Vancouver, Victoria, there was one in Duncan for a period of time. It's where all signal phases show red and allows a pedestrian to cross in any direction they choose. Timing must be such there's enough time built into that red phase that the crossing could occur diagonally, and typically time for some of the sort of slower moving pedestrians so that everyone could cross safely. So that was one option. Second option was to introduce leading pedestrian intervals on any or all legs. This is a condition where the phase that allows a pedestrian to cross begins before any of the conflicting vehicle phases begin, and that allows the pedestrian to get out in front and better seen by a turning motorist. So it's really a sort of a safety enhancement for pedestrians. The third option was a no right turn on red restriction. So again, a couple specific movements that were targeted, but could be applied to any of the right turns, where it's common practice where there's a red light, a motorist can stop, look for conflict and then make that right turn. No right turn on red actually protects crossing pedestrians so that they're not exposed to this potential conflict with the right turner. Option 4, I mentioned previously that the east legs, the legs sort of closest to 5th Street Bridge, doesn't allow for crossing currently. So option 4 was the option to introduce a new crossing on that 4th leg. And then option 5 was the option to remove the northbound right turn channelized right turn and instead bring the through lane and still a dedicated right turn lane, but bring them directly adjacent one another, and thereby removing the two-stage crossing that's required of a pedestrian to make it across that leg. So we put these options through a multi-criteria analysis to determine what might best match the objectives for this exercise, while balancing off some of the negative impacts that might occur with each of these. And in the end, determined that options 4, which is to introduce the east leg crossing, and option 5, sort of primarily, were of sort of greatest benefit, and the ones that are recommended for this location. So diagrams on the screen in front of us showing at left the current configuration, sort of from aerial view, and on the right, conceptual design for what the changes might entail. I'm actually going to zoom in here a little bit too. Yeah. So key features, this is a concept, so would need to be worked through if this is an option that we want to advance, would need to be worked through to a greater level of detail. But at a conceptual level, what's being shown here is the introduction of the crossing on the east leg. And so that would introduce new crossing opportunity that's not in place today. The crossing on the south leg on Cliff Avenue would actually be squared up with the removal of that right turn channel, that pedestrian would cross directly across now, which is of benefit in terms of reducing that total crossing time and distance, as well as improving sightlines for motorists that would be waiting at the adjacent stop bar. On the south east corner, where the pork chop island has been removed, there's now additional space by way of sidewalk expansion to introduce greater space for gathering in public space. There might be an opportunity to further think about how that space might be utilized. And then I guess just also worth pointing out that the right turn channelization removal has been replaced with a still right turn lane, and that's been tested with the geometry that's shown in the concept to still accommodate some of the larger vehicles on the road. So we know this is a key transit movement. We know emergency services operates through here, so that alignment has been set to accommodate those activities. So some of the key benefits, pedestrian safety is the key benefit here, really, largely supported by the removal of the channelized right turn, improved pedestrian connectivity and reduced crossing time. So the introduction of that fourth crossing leg really will cut time out of a pedestrian trip needed to make certain movements through the intersection. And then the added benefit of additional public space. We've costed these improvements at approximately $600,000. There would need to be some sort of refinement as design is advanced to confirm that number, and if other features might be included in the design in the end. We figure we're at approximately $600,000, and we've just identified a few of the next steps there as well. So with that, I'll conclude. I'm very happy to answer any questions.
All right, thanks very much for the presentation. And we have Councillor Cullen.
Yeah, thanks very much. I thought I'd be interrupting, but there weren't that many slides. I would just want to be clear that I note that in your report, you suggested options 4 and 5. And the last slide where you're talking about cost, it said option brackets S. So, but I know our staff report suggested only option 5. So I just wanted to clarify on the previous slide, was that was that referring to both options 4 and 5 together?
So the costing was completed for both the removal of the right turn channelization. And it's not just as simple as work away the channelization. There's curb work that goes with that, as well as introducing the new crossing. Now, the new crossing, the costs associated with that are a little lighter than the channelization removal. It really is some paint line work plus the curb ramp on the far side.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Given that we've now clarified what we're talking about from that presentation, can I ask a follow-up? That's all right. I was just wondering, given that you're proposing 4 and 5, and that's what the presentation just spoke to, I just wondering if we could hear from staff about the there were images of 4 and 5 in the staff report, but it is only option 5 that's being proposed by staff. I was wondering if we could maybe hear a bit about that decision.
Mr. Shaw.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor Cole Hamilton, thanks for the question. Yes, in terms of options with respect to direct impact, inclusive of safety with respect to pedestrian access, option 5 was recommended by staff as the one to pursue in terms of recommendation to council because it meets all of those criteria needs. Whereby option 4 does meet the particular need in terms of establishing an effective crossing. It does not add the placemaking or the security of spacing that Mr. Casey spoke to in terms of transportation vehicle interfaces and sightlines, whereby option 5 would facilitate a greater improvement in those particular areas and offer less of an impact in terms of our overall service reduction within the signals phasing. I will offer, if I may, just in terms of your point about cost, and Mr. Casey spoke to the actual physical constructability of this doesn't seem to be fairly significant in terms of curb realignment and some repaving. And the majority of the costs, however, are specifically allocated to the overheads and the bases and the electrical conduit and the conduiting that would be required to replace to facilitate all of these works and services. As part of this review, we looked at the in-service assets and understood that we've inherited some of these assets pre-city, so they were ministry assets prior to them being divested to the city. And so some of the subsurface infrastructure does not meet current standards, and thereby the overheads are currently situated as an overweight or overcapacity scenario. So it is recommended that they be removed and replaced and brought to current standard as part of this works.
All right, thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton and Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, I had a question. About the vehicle reduction on that. I guess it's northbound turning right onto Fifth. What sort of reduction we might see if we put in that crossing?
Yeah, good question. So I think the reference there is to removal of that channelization on the right-hand turn and bringing it in line with the through lane. In terms of vehicle impacts, it'd be very, very limited. I think the real objective there is to enhance that pedestrian crossing versus when we talk about the introducing potentially the fourth leg crossing, that is in direct conflict, especially with the westbound left turn, which is quite a heavy movement. And so that would be taking green time away from that movement in order to accommodate the pedestrian crossing. So very little impact on this right turn channelization removal in terms of traffic operations, more so on introducing that fourth leg crossing.
Right, yeah, so a huge reduction in people turning onto Cliff left, like you mentioned. And I imagine there's still, like I turn right all the time onto Fifth, but you're right, it probably isn't nearly as big of a number. Do we know what kind of number that would look like then for the people coming up Fifth and going left on Cliff? Like what kind of, I guess I could imagine it myself would be quite a few cars every.
Through the mayor, yeah, we do have some of the count data in the kind of in the back of the reporting. The comments on how many vehicles are actually doing that right now. In terms of sort of how many fewer might do that if there was a level of delay incurred, it's very difficult to sort of guesstimate what that might look like. But we do have some figures on what that level of added delay might be if that were pursued.
Right.
Yeah.
And quickly, I guess I was going to ask about the placemaking piece. I imagine adding a fourth leg could drastically improve the placemaking on that other corner that's so hard to get to. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Also, safety for people trying to run across Fifth Street, because it takes them 3 legs of crossing to get directly across, which I've certainly seen done. Is that something you contemplated?
Anecdotally, we don't have any sort of data or evidence to support this, but your last point around sort of in the absence of the formalized crossing, are we sort of queuing up a situation that's encouraging jaywalking? Quite likely. I guess I haven't observed that for myself, but just I could see that in practice. I think the placemaking element, we didn't go to any level of detail in terms of designing out what placemaking features could be put in place, only to say that with each of these potential crossing improvements, there will be greater opportunities to do that. And I would encourage whatever it is that moves forward, that there is some specific consideration given to how this added space or the added encouragement of pedestrian activity in this area could be well supported through targeted placemaking.
Yeah. And it's not just jaywalking, it's actually like a hurdle because there's a chain link fence there. So anyways, thanks.
So extra exercise. Thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the presentation and the report. I found it very useful to see how the options were broken down, and I'm often ready for option one to be the preferred option, but not in this report. So yeah, and then I was also a little confused why the summary suggested both, but the staff recommendation was different, although that's been covered. One question I had in reading the way that it was modeled, it points out that the modeling has an activated crossing at every light rotation. So I'm just wondering how that reflects what the reality is currently. Because if there's someone on the corner that would want to take the leg that doesn't exist, currently they would have to press a button 3 times, which would change the signal timing 3 times, or they could press it 1 time if we added the crossing, and then that would have a one-time impact. So I was just having a hard time understanding like how it could have such a measurable impact if it was reflecting that kind of scenario, because it's not drawing more people to cross the road. It's providing a more efficient crossing. So if you could explain that one to me.
Yeah, that's a really good question or good point. I think my understanding is though that so all the modeling work, there was an AM peak and a PM peak that was tested. Those are the most critical times of day when delay is incurred, and if we change things, more delay can be incurred. So that's been the focus, admittedly. And in those times, I suspect we're seeing call ups. So whether it's a vehicle or a pedestrian pushing the button, that green time is basically being maximized the way it is right now. So a pedestrian making, unfortunately, 3 potential crossings and pushing the button potentially 3 times is probably not adding any more call ups to that signal than is already occurring during those peak times anyways. That might be the case during off peak. And admittedly, we didn't model that, where some of the lesser legs, so the Cliff North and Fifth West, might not be getting the vehicle call-ups anyways, and a pedestrian pushing the button might be causing that light to turn green. But I do suspect that's really not kicking in during those peak times.
Yeah.
If I may just add to that, thank you through the mayor to Councilor McCollum. So yeah, Mr. Casey is correct in terms of the timing for that particular signal. During peak times, the call out for whether that be a pedestrian or a motor vehicle would likely be at its maximum because it's operating at its peak and utmost required durations with respect to the traffic volumes and pedestrian volumes that it's seeing. So it would be maximized in terms of all legs and movements. And so anyone pushing that button wouldn't necessarily impact. It may cause delay as someone has to yield to that individual, and that would be on a right turn movement, but not not in the through movement. They would be maximized. As Mr. Casey pointed out, in terms of off peak, unfortunately, this particular corridor in and of itself and the signals and the timing machines haven't been updated quite recent, haven't been updated at all in recent years. And so the timing of them would facilitate a maximum use regardless of call up. So really the call up that you're seeing at that particular signal with a pedestrian is just providing the activated hand signals in terms of movement across the intersection and the invitation for when it is safe and not safe. It wouldn't change the overall timing.
Yeah, because I mean, my observation, I mean, I go through that intersection probably 4 times a day between my car travel and my bike travel. And when there is a pedestrian activating it to go through what you called a pork chop, that extends the crossing, or it's a longer light when someone presses that button than when it's just a car activation. So I guess I don't want to get too into the weeds, but the option for that 4th connection showed a slowdown of westbound traffic. But to me, like logically, the only slowdown that makes sense to me is what's outlined in option 5, which is the right-hand turn across that new crossing, which isn't highlighted in option 4. So I'm having a hard time just understanding what the impacts are. And then the assumption that someone's going to press it every time, just it doesn't really necessarily reflect how I see that intersection used. So yeah, I don't know if there's any more commentary on that, but
Sure, if I may, as well, through this, obviously, as we move through the capital redeployment and the renewal of our assets within these corridors, this conversation about this corridor has come up quite a few times. As well, when we talk about the rapid transit or the frequent transit network for the CBRD, working through this corridor and providing continuity. So signal coordination is obviously a goal through these renewal programs. One intersection in of itself is going to have a great impact, but signal coordination through the corridor, inclusive of 6th and 8th, could have quite a significant impact. And as we go through those analytics to understand what technology we'd like to introduce, AI often comes up to that. And so cameras within the intersections to help identify opportunities for improvements live within the corridor are opportunities that staff are certainly look at when we come to the renewal of these assets, so they can run in concert with each other and continue to optimize in real time as the corridor evolves. And so we'll definitely be looking at that in terms of infrastructure relative to the renewal of it. But as I said, one intersection in and of itself wouldn't necessarily constitute an improvement. What is articulated in this report that adding that 4th leg, regardless of how you do it, will have a negative impact in today's scenario. What we're hoping for as future scenario and future proofing the corridor, as continuity is created and developed within the signals, within the coordination of the signals, that we will be able to regain some of those net losses in terms of fluidity and movement within the corridor.
All right, thanks for that. And Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks. So I have some questions also about the East Lake crossing, and while a lot of it, there's obviously a lot of common sense reasons why it would be good to have that crossing available so people aren't jaywalking. And I work right at that corner, and I see more times than I'd like to say people jaywalking there. I'm trying to understand why that would cause considerable increases in the westbound through traffic. And maybe you already answered it, but perhaps I didn't grasp it. And I could see it slowing down left turns, but not straight through and not right. And the degree to which it appears to be slowing it down is really quite remarkable. Like 125% increase in wait times. It's if I'm getting that right. Can you help me explain why it's so considerable for the two directions that aren't the left turn if you're coming up from the bridge?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is all 3 movements, whether it's left through or right, they are stopping to facility crossing that they don't have to stop for today. And so now the number of 125% increase in delay sounds staggering. We're already at movements that are approaching, a problematic or even a failing performance level. So just the addition of that relatively modest amount of red time for those movements does start to push those movements over. So it's kind of a compounding type thing where it might only represent, a few, I don't even know the exact answer, but a modest increase in wait time. That wait time is starting to push those movements over.
Okay, thank you. It's possible to have one more question. I think building on what Mr. Shaw was saying, it sounded like there might be some possibility that once those lights are like along that stretch or better understood and integrated together, that would that allow us to, I guess the first question is it possible to stage it to option 5 at this point, and then when we have a better understanding of traffic flow through that area, then consider adding the fourth leg? That may be a question for Mr. Shaw as to whether it's a logical way of doing things, and I guess also like, does the infrastructure, can you build it in that sort of sequence?
So maybe I'll start us off, but in terms of surface infrastructure, in terms of the roadworks, yes, what's been laid out here can be done under pursuing option 5 only. So that could be set in such a way that it's compatible with if that 4th leg crossing were introduced sometime down the line. No concern there. I think the signal infrastructure, we need to think in terms of the infrastructure itself, the overheads. I'm pretty confident that could be done all as part of that same project too. It would need to be. Conduit, loops, detectors, depends on the technology that ends up getting pursued in the end. But if it is a loop-based technology, if you're in there doing work, doing the loops at that same time isn't terribly onerous above and beyond what's already being done. So would probably be wise to locate the loops that need to move on the 5th Street east leg side. Just do it at the same time if there's a sense this might be coming down the line in future. It would just then be the signal controller itself, which doesn't need to be done at the exact same time and could be done as 6th and 8th are being entertained at the same time.
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councilor Cole Hamilton. The short answer to that is yes, absolutely. The work could be done within the confines of this particular capital consideration to facilitate the movement that's contemplated with the timing that's contemplated, and then set dormant at so such a time that the extents of the corridor, including 6th and 8th, are then upgraded, and then the timing is then introduced. The only outlying asset in terms of installation would be the thermoplastic to facilitate the actual crossing across cliff at that time. So it could all be preset and put on pause in terms of like the infrastructure would be in place, the aerials would be there, the curb alignment could be in place. The only thing that wouldn't be there is the physical crosswalk, and then the timing sheet would just be updated as the corridor is modified to facilitate the movement, and then the fluidity of it would all happen at once.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, thanks, Councilor Cole Hamilton and Councilor Frisch.
Thanks again. I just wanted to come back to the delays that would be incurred in option 4. And I guess I'm just struggling to fully understand. And I guess maybe we don't even know for sure, but you know what that looks like. I see it's 80 seconds of delay in the afternoon for that westbound left you were talking about being so significantly impacted. Yeah, and then going the opposite direction, I guess, as well. The eastbound through looks heavily impacted as well. And there's a lot of people moving in those directions. Like, how does that look backing up the road towards Ryan Road, or, you know, during the evening, people trying to get across? And now might be a good example with the Comox Road being closed down.
Yeah.
I mean, traffic, most people think it's described as mayhem, and I certainly felt like that driving around. So, or would we be creating a situation like that where traffic's just always backed up there?
Yeah, so through the mayor, again, these are sort of references to the busiest morning and the busiest afternoon hour. So sort of take that for what it is. But yeah, those impacts would be would add to what we're experiencing out there right now. I mean, I drove through it on the way here at 3:45, and it's real. There's definitely congestion, especially on that left turn, under conditions the way they are today, and this would be adding to that. There is the opportunity to optimize signal timings to essentially steal time from other movements and give more time to this movement. Those are complex relationships, and so on the spot, I can't sort of suggest what the impact of doing that might be, but that's something that can be entertained too. Optimization is one thing, and other is we see this on ministry, on provincial corridors, where preference is given to dominant movements at the disbenefit of some of the more minor movements. There's always the opportunity to trial that in this location as well, if there's concern that we're adding delay to an already problematic movement.
Well, that's hopeful to know. And I find that I'm balancing out these delays in vehicle movement with the reality that as we add 10,000 more people to Courtenay, that'll likely be the case anyways, unless we get people walking more, unless we get people using other modes of transportation. So it's kind of like if this construction shows us anything, it's that we're probably headed there anyways. Yeah, and I'm just throwing that out there to share what I'm thinking at the moment. And so I noticed we don't have any motion on the screen, but just off the cuff, I actually see another question, so I'll stop talking for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor McCullough.
I would have been okay if you put a motion forward, but I'll share some thoughts too. Yeah, I think there is a real opportunity with the signalized timing to address some of the delays at this intersection. The most common thing that I see in terms of traffic impacts is actually just cars not being able to move through the left-hand turn lane because that there is nowhere to go. On the other side of the intersection, it doesn't seem to me that it's actually not enough time to move through the intersection itself. Also, the biggest impacted direction, if we're to add the fourth leg, is straight up Fifth Street. That doesn't seem to be the greatest concern generally, but also there is an option there to turn right, and often that is what traffic does when it's backed up, is they take a right-hand turn and go up Fourth Street. So, you know, I have some hesitations on putting this kind of capital towards half fixing this intersection is what I feel like we're talking about by only looking at option 5. I do feel that option 5 does address the biggest safety concern. That slip through turn lane is in a way to encourage people not to slow down enough to have a look if there's pedestrians. I don't feel comfortable crossing there. So I think that is a really important improvement, but I don't think it really quite addresses what the full needs are for pedestrian movement on what is the entry to downtown. And we are hearing from the Downtown Business Association in our recent engagement through the OCP that they would like to see more pedestrianization. So I don't see doing the half approach as the best way. I mean, that option 4 and 5 was what was laid out in this traffic study, and I'm in support of what was in the summary and also the diagrams that are shared in the staff report. So I would also add that we have the Witchard Plaza on the other side of the road that is completely underutilized, and you know, providing better connectivity. There's also a very nice little public space beside Blue Spruce, and you know, those two places can be activated much easier if there is a crossing. And yeah, I just think that this would be a benefit to downtown and people using it if we prioritize pedestrian movement over yeah, delaying a couple cars, perhaps when there's a lot of people around walking. So I would like to move that council endorse option 4 and 5. And yeah, to remove the northbound right turn channel and direct staff to add the fourth leg to the Cliff Ave and Fifth Street intersection improvement project to the 2026 financial plan.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Do you want to speak further to it, Councillor McCullough? No, it's all good. Any other questions or comments? Maybe I see Councillor Cole Hamilton, but I haven't spoken yet, so I'll just, I appreciate the motion, because I feel that was the direction that council was asking for, and providing that. And I fully understand that there's a lot of complexity to go into it. And there's also a lot of things happening on the riverfront, with the buildings coming down and potentially some opportunities there. But I unfortunately, having done many events downtown and having to go and do that loop is definitely something that stands out. Mr. Shaw.
If I may, just one thing. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through yourself to council. I just want to clarify. So the recommendation has been modified to include option 4 and 5. And I'm apologies if this was not clear, but option 5 does include the crossing leg. It just also includes the channelization. So option 4 was without channelization, leaving the island and adding the leg. And option 5 is the channelization with the crossing.
I think that might not have been clear.
Okay.
Yeah.
We just caught that towards the end of the discussion. So
yep.
If I may. Sorry,
Mr. Gardner.
Through the mayor to council as a whole, I will profess I was the page 3 of the staff report, option 5. It says, note this option does not include new crossing of the east intersection leg. That perhaps is a typo.
Correct.
So we've had
Well,
a
there you go.
fairly long discussion. My sincere apologies through the council because I read it in signing this report. My apologies. I did not note the last or clearly read the last sentence of the first paragraph under option 5 on page 3. So I just want to acknowledge
I feel
that.
we may need to
This was
rescind
becoming more apparent.
to my
My
legislative-
apologies.
Yeah.
So
Gonna look to my legislative helpers. We're gonna rescind. Yeah. Especially given the staff report.
That's fair.
Okay, and the budget doesn't, it's the same dollar amount. Because that was good, that was actually my only other question is how does that change the dollar amount? But obviously it doesn't. Mr. Garbutt.
Yeah, thank you. That's why I spoke up, and I would concur with Councillor McCollum. Given the words in the staff report, which would be the matter of public record, unless we changed it in that the motion to do option 4 and 5 would clarify the east leg would in fact be a component. The images, I just would note, the images show that, and so just wanted to acknowledge where I was seeing the conversation going, and my apologies for not speaking sooner.
So option 5, just so I'm clear, there's a new crosswalk that works.
The report.
Yep.
Apologies. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The report is incorrect, and I apologize for that. So the way that Councilor McCollum articulated would provide clarity with respect to how the report reads.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Just so that at the end of the day, because that's all I was concerned about. So I'm happy with where we are. So it may have taken a little bit longer. It was maybe a longer journey than sometimes we have, but oh, Ms. O'Connell.
Can I just, so I've got that council endorse options 4 and 5, remove northbound. The statement is there, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just 4 and 5, and then everything else is exactly the same. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm gonna, did you want to? All right. You sure? Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm happy that Councillor McCollum made that clarification and put those together because I think it really supports that whole placemaking piece. And I know those businesses that are, well, the businesses in particular that where Blue Spruce is, I mean, it's such a lovely little corner and it could just be so much better utilized. And then, of course, as Councillor McCollum said, around the Sid or the Randy Witcher Plaza. I mean, when Ryan Smoller came to town and did the placemaking presentation, he pointed out the Randy Witcher Plaza as being just such a beautiful, like the potential of that space could be so much more. And I just think, all of it together could be, yeah, just great. So thanks. I obviously fully support this this direction. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Moore and Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I have to say, my intent of that very first question was to clarify this, and I obviously didn't ask my question clearly enough. So this is obviously complete. Everything I've been asking up until now has been based upon a misunderstanding of what we're looking at. But given that is the option, I support that. I'm just wondering if inherent in that option is that efforts will be taken to to retime the lights at 5th, to do whatever can be done in the immediate term prior to the 5th, 6th, 8th review to minimize the potential minimize the potential disruptions that were pointed out in your report by retiming, perhaps by borrowing time from other pieces, but that will be something which is sort of proceeded on concurrently with the actual construction so that we can make sure we get the most efficient flow through the intersection for all modes of transit when it's actually in place. So I'm just wondering, is that inherent to the motion, or would that need to be added? So I'm looking at Dan, that's probably not, I should be looking at Kyle.
Well, I'm happy to jump in on that.
Sure,
I think
yeah, go for it.
typical- So a next step would be detailed design. Anytime we're building new infrastructure like this, the concept I showed is not, that's not detailed design. So a next step would be detailed design. And typically when there's signal infrastructure involved in that, or changes in traffic operations, signal timing sheets are produced. And that's what basically tells the controller when to go green and red. And there's a level of sort of automation in that, but then to optimize, but then there's always the ability to manually adjust to feature whichever movements we would like to be featuring. Not something that typically sort of comes necessarily to the council table, but I think with sort of broad guidance, some of that featuring of certain movements over others could be carried out through that.
Okay, maybe I'll ask Dr. Shaw just to weigh in that would be a parallel process trying to optimize the concerns about westbound traffic on Fifth to make that flow more smoothly.
Yeah, thank you for that. Actually, through the mayor to Councillor Cole Hamilton, obviously, through the capital improvements and the upgrade to the signal infrastructure, timing sheets, as Mr. Casey spoke to, would have to be updated to meet the needs and obviously the fluidity, the movement intent of this corridor through this analysis, and always looking to optimize through the corridor. Unfortunately, timing sheets and the signal cabinets infrastructure without cameras aren't dynamic, and they would be fairly static, and they're subject to their counterparts and other corridor within the corridor, as well as phasing does get interrupted through emergency services as well as they move through the corridor because they get priority phasing as it goes. So it'll be a process. Obviously, look through, as Mr. Casey pointed out earlier, opportunities to optimize the heavier movements to produce and enhance any offsetting impacts that may be resulting from this particular crossing. So the short answer to your question is yes. Through that analytical design, engineering standards, we look to optimize the function of this intersection in isolation, and then how it may function better in collaboration with its future counterparts.
Yeah, maybe if I could just add to that too, infrastructure is permanent. Those timings, they can be adjusted over time. So, we do our best on the first go. And if we're seeing certain movements experiencing excessive delays, you can always adjust those timings and try and do better.
Ask a really quick.
Mr. Herbert might have had a comment as well.
I just wanted to go just to make sure, because we've had an extended conversation here. If council wants to provide specific direction around the timing, I think that would be appropriate, just to make sure it's very clear. And I always support clear direction. So whether we intend or not, sometimes I say, yeah, let's get a motion. If not, in this case, because of the type of dialogue here and the staff report and the attached professional report, because I'm reading under the summary where it actually kind of talks the recommendation, what council, if the staff are talking about option 5, is actually the combination of both options, which is highlighted in page 19 of 23 under summary, third last paragraph. So I think very clear. The new motion would address that, but council saying that they want to optimize the programming and timing of the lights so as to avoid as much congestion as possible is an appropriate motion, and staff can ensure that that's part of the work program.
As a subsequent motion or as an amendment?
Can I make that as an amendment, Mr. Connell?
Maybe subsequent motion, just because we get this through and then we have that subsequent motion.
Okay, sure.
That's okay.
Come back to it.
Thank you.
And I just have still that quick subsequent question, which is the anticipated work on the 5th, 6th, and 8th, in sort of aligning the timing on those. Is that something for which there's already direction to proceed? And do we have an idea of what the timeline would be? Because it would be ideal not to be tweaking these things several times in a row. I'm wondering what the timing would be on that and if we have direction for it. The study and retiming of those 3 sets of lights.
So currently, to foreshadow the capital plan, we're looking to do 1 intersection per year in subsequent years within the capital plan. So council will see this particular intersection rise at the top if resolved to support this direction. And then 6th and 8th would follow in subsequent years. So it would take several years for it to actually come to fruition in terms of creating the continuity throughout the corridor. We're hoping that 6th may see some nudges from some granting to potentially move those ones as well along the way as well, or expedite some of those, but it will take time for this to come to fruition. It's a bit of a, you know, heaven forbid I say it, a bit of a journey in order to get it to where we want it to go, but it's going to take time in terms of infrastructure renewal to actually see it come to fruition. I will offer it, and we've talked about this, timing sheets are point in time and can be amended as we go. We sit at the precipice of opportunity to potentially leapfrog technologies and look at AI and opportunities of AI within active transportation modeling. And those technologies reside as opportunities for us as we go from historically aged infrastructure into new and modern infrastructure, and to leapfrog and add those technologies at the forefront, at the heart of our infrastructure when it comes to transportation corridor networking in our community, and then expand on that beyond will only further optimize and provide real-time updates, and rather than specific time and point amendments to timing sheets. But timing sheets are fairly reasonable and easy for us as a staff to work with our consulting firms at the time if we realize that we're seeing notifications from public, or even operationally as we're out there doing our maintenance, that there's inefficiencies within it. We can certainly go back and optimize those on a per annum basis as we continue to optimize each intersection along the corridor.
Okay, I'll wait until I'm going to raise my subsequent motion to ask a further question. I'll pass it on to Director Frisch.
Councillor Frisch.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Well,
You're not a director.
I want to chew on these intersections as well a bit. So do you think we have the capacity to do a decent job timing, 5th, 6th, and 8th in conjunction with this construction work? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So through the mayor to Councillor Frisch, in due time. So currently the signal infrastructure wouldn't support continuity or communication between the three. And that's really what we're seeing in terms of impasse within the corridor right now. They are set in their timing and they run and function as timed, that they don't talk or nor are they linked to each other to show continuous fluidity within those movements or those priority movements down 5th. It's not until such time that those cabinets and those infrastructures are upgraded that we could create the linkage between them to create the continuity and fluidity for the corridor.
And you're suggesting the capacity to change that infrastructure is going to take years, because you're thinking we could do one every year.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
like we couldn't be like, let's spend a bit more money and do all three at once. I mean, money, I'll always spend more money, but like what are we talking about?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as Councillor Moran or McCollum pointed out, there's more than just these three within the corridor. If you get across the bridge onto Cliff, and then you get to Ryan Road at Old Island Highway, the 5 in conjunction really would provide the most movement, the most effective efficiency through it. But within, just on Cliff, those three in and of themselves working simultaneously and together would create a great deal of efficiency within the corridor, as they don't currently reside in that sense. The technology that resides within those cabinets is very aged, and emergency services use it as a priority route, and they do go into reset every time an emergency vehicle goes through, and then they start over. So there's no continuity between them. So once they reset, they restart their movements in isolation of each other, and they don't speak.
Mm-hmm. So, sorry, so how much would it cost to fix that?
I hesitate to give a number, but if we're looking at
ballpark,
a
like millions or
figure of
100.
600,000 to 750 per intersection, you're upwards of 200 and a quarter to 250.
There we go.
Sorry, 2 million.
That makes it quite clear to me what we're talking about then. Yeah. Okay. And construction timeline, as you said, put it in the 2026 plan. Ballpark, best case, worst case. When do you think we might do this kind of work on 5th? Obviously, no one wants to see it happen from a driving perspective, but what do you think?
Yeah, after the closure and the reopening of the conveyance project, hopefully the traffic within the downtown core will subside a little bit. Staff are very aware of this particular intersection, the importance of this intersection in our community, as well as to the downtown or the BIA within high business season or tour season in the summer. So we look to shoulder this work in the springtime prior to, if approved through the council program, and get this intersection up and running before prime time in the summer.
Thank you.
Mr. Garbutt, did you have a comment?
Very, very quickly, I know Councillor Cole-Hamilton, I think, had another question. Council may recall that we have a number of transportation and intersection conversations happening coincident with up in the Ryan corridor. We've got bus prioritization lights that are going to be coming through federal granting, and then the work that Mr. Shaw's group is doing on our own signals. So there's a significant and large coordination effort around traffic signals that are all interconnected, which will be happening, I believe, in 2026. If I'm speaking correctly, with the combination with a number of parties at the table: Ministry of Transportation, CVRD, BC Transit, the federal infrastructure grants that they've had, and then the work that we're going to do. So I've been taking some detailed notes here about like the issues that are coming back, and we probably should be bringing back maybe a conceptualized staff report on like what's happening with managing traffic signals, so council's aware, and then we have a good understanding, because as evidence over the past year, the impacts related to the conveyance and communication and timing is pointing out those deficiencies inside our lack of connectedness in our system. So I happened to have that conversation with the Ministry of Transportation Island Director, most recently as well. So I'll work with Mr. Shaw and just conceptualize a staff report back to kind of unpack some of the challenges that we have and where we're headed for council's information.
All right. Looks like we got the motion on the floor. No further questions or comments. I just maybe have one last comment, just to pass on from the BIA and some of the business downtown, and from myself as well. But the repaving you guys did of Fifth and got rid of those wavy bumps, that was right on. So I just see this as the next step. So I just really want to thank staff for taking, I think, some nudges from council and making that happen. With that,
Sorry, so I did catch generally the objective of the motion, and you may have seen me running around in the background.
Yep.
So I just would like to read it as I believe council has intended for clarity. So council is very clear as to what the motion is that is on the floor.
Okay.
That council endorse options 4 and 5, including the removal of the northbound right turn channel. Next bullet point, adding the fourth leg crossing, and that staff be directed to add the Cliff Avenue and 5th Street intersection improvement project to the 2026 financial plan.
what you said sounds exactly what I had in my mind of what I wanted to hear. And I think, so really appreciate that. I do realize it's not what is on the screen right now, but just looking at council, everybody's nodding in agreement. So with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? And motion carries. And Councillor Cole-Hamilton, you wanted subsequent?
Thank you. I'm not sure if Mr. Shaw wanted to add something. He's got his light on to what we were previously. Okay, cool. Ms. O'Connell came over with wording, and so which we agreed upon, but I saw it about 5 minutes ago.
I'm happy to read it out loud.
Thank you.
So that council, oops. Of course, I started adjusting based on the rest of it. The council directs staff to optimize the timing of the existing traffic signals with the objective of decreasing downtown congestion on Cliff Avenue. And downtown is capitalized as a defined term.
Okay, that's someone cares to second it. That's the motion.
All right. Been moved and seconded. Do you want to speak to it?
I think we've spoken to it, but my understanding of that motion combined with the previous motion is there will be then like a fairly comprehensive review of the signalization in downtown to increase flow. So just I think it's a good companion to the last motion. Yeah, thanks everyone.
And with the city manager's comments about like the bus signalization and all the other stuff. Yeah. So sounds like we're going to have
a buffet of traffic signaling things. So that being said, all those in favor? And motion carries. Thanks so much for that conversation. We do have some external reports and correspondence. We have the Nanaimo. And now it's up on the screen. Okay, so we're gonna receive this. I think it was seconded. Yep, perfect. All those in favor? Motion carries. And bylaws for final adoption. We'll move into our building amendment bylaw 3193 for the BC Zero carbon step code. Okay, been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And any opposed? And motion carries. And we'll move on to business license amendment bylaw for storefront cannabis retailer. That's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments regarding this? Again, thanks for moving this through by end of year. Much appreciated. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And then we have the subdivision development servicing bylaw number 3200. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries on that. Getting the council reports, Councillor Cole Hamilton. Councillor Frisch, Councillor Jolker's not here, Councillor McCollum, Councillor Morin. No, thank you. I will just mention a couple of things. We did have Orange Shirt Day yesterday. And again, just want to thank all the councillors that came out and our community that came out to support. Also, our council did attend UBCM last week. Check out Facebook if you want to know what we did. And finally, I also attended the Police Officer Memorial in Victoria. That is an annual memorial for police officers and peace officers that have lost their lives during the service. With that being said, we're now adjourned.